Good evening and welcome to the March meeting of the Granville Executive Village Board of Education. Thank you all for being here. Would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, thank you all for being here tonight. There's plenty of seats over here, too. You take the roll.
Mr. Denise?
Here.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Foreman?
Here.
Ms. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Wolf? Here.
All right, let's get on to the important stuff.
Yes.
Nominations.
This is always my favorite part of the meeting, where we get to commend our students and staff members. So we're going to start with our two wrestlers here up front. Congratulations to Blue Ace wrestlers Keegan Van Meter and Douglas Terry, who competed at the OHSAA State Wrestling Tournament over, it was 2 weekends ago, right? Both boys placed and came home with medals, making this the first time the Granville has had two placers in the same season. Douglas reached the finals, eventually earning second place. This is the highest state placement in school history. Keegan was forced to default due to injury, but he's going to be on the men's soon, and finished sixth, getting to the semifinals. As a team, Granville finished 23rd out of 196 Division II teams in the state as a result of Douglas and Keegan's point totals. While Douglas aims for a state title next season, this marks the end of a great career for Keegan. He's also an amazing football player. Keegan ends his career as a three-time state qualifier, which is a school record, a district champion, and a state placer. Congratulations, boys, and come on up and get your comments. You gotta smile. Because your mom's gonna want a picture too. Take one more. 2, 3. All right, let's turn here. All right. Very proud of you. Going from the mat, we're going now into the pool. So now we'd like to recognize several members of the Granville High School swim team and their coaches, Tyler and Hillary Paulson. Oh, I forgot to reference Kyle. Kyle Bergeron, coach. Right over you. Sorry. Who qualified for the state meet? Brianna White, Alessandro Crema, Cole McDermott, Julian Rogers, Bryson Hewenstein, and Peter Lighthouser, a relay alternate, all participated in the meet. Brenna White finished 24th in the 100-yard freestyle, and Alessandro Crema finished 13th in the 100-yard backstroke. The relay team of Cole McDermott, Julian Rogers, Bryson Hewenstein, Alessandro Crema, and alternate Peter Lighthouser finished 23rd in the 400-yard free relay as well. So congratulations to all of you. We're very proud of you. And come on up and get your accommodation. Congratulations. There you are. Congratulations. Cole, congratulations. Julian, congratulations. Bryson, congratulations. Did that give one else time to tell? Okay, all right. And Peter, so you put your pro. All right, we're going to take the photo here, and your parents will get the photo op as well. We're going to stand right here and smile, and because you're going to be on the website. 1, 2, 3, we'll take one more. All right, now parents.
Got it.
And do we need to rotate? Excellent. Congratulations. And last, we'd like to recognize and congratulate our Granville Middle School Language Arts teacher, Pam Weiss, for being this year's winner of the You Make a Difference Award, sponsored by Coghlan Automotive. Pam was nominated by a student, Grace Wolf. In her nomination, Grace states that Mrs. Weiss is energetic. I can attest to this. She demonstrates real excitement about her class and material. She clearly has a passion for literature, teaching, and middle school students. I consider her a role model. Good teachers know how to bring out the best in students. The influence of teachers extend beyond the classroom and into the future. One cannot tell where their influence ends. We are extremely grateful for Mrs. Weiss. Indeed, we are. Very lucky to have Pam Weiss as one of our staff members here in Granville Schools. Congratulations, Pam. Well deserved. I've had one child, now 2 children go through, so I can attest to your skill from a parent perspective and as a superintendent. Congratulations, and come on up. Thank you. So this is the time where parents, if you want to run, you can. Because I know your children are going to head out. Thank you very much for being here.
That completes our meeting.
Yeah, so we'd like to invite our student ambassador, Kristen Zeno, up to the podium to give her student report.
Hello, school board. Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Zadel. I'm the student body president at Granville High School, and so I'm here to give a little student report. So as you can see with the athletics, we had a really awesome winter sports season. So the wrestling and swim went to states, as well as the competition cheerleading and the indoor track. And then we had the women's bowling go to district finals, I believe, and then the women's basketball also went to district finals, and the boys basketball went to district semifinals. And that's like very far for our basketball teams to go, and so we also had really awesome student showings at both of those games, and so it's been really awesome to see the students rally around our basketball teams. In the arts, the Seussical the musical is underway, and all of the art students are excited about that. They have rehearsals going and the set being built, and so you can expect that the first weekend of May. In academics, so the Senior Global Awareness Project is gaining a lot of momentum the past few weeks, as the seniors have taken 2 field trips to Ohio State to go into the library and do research on the projects the countries that they're assigned. And so that's been a very interesting experience for the seniors, as well as they have Denison mentors who are either from that country or experts on that country, and so they've been having donuts with Denison, where they go and meet and learn about their countries. So, and then they also, when we have standardized testing going on the next few months, there's chunked times for the seniors who work on that capstone project. So that's really exciting. And then lastly, this is the last week of the 3rd quarter, and so there's a lot of tests and cramming going on, but it all ends Friday, last day of the 3rd quarter. And then we have spring break, which let me tell you, students are excited. All anyone is talking about is spring break. And so it's going to be a really great time of rest and relaxation for most of Granville. Unless you're like me, and then it's going to be like college visit stress time. But that's fine. Have a great meeting. Thank you very much.
We will have some of those other participants here at the next meeting, but we didn't have enough space for all of our teams, so you can let them know. All right, that takes us into our staff reports as Tanya Sherburne, our Director of Operations and Human Resources, comes up and gets set up. Let me frame this conversation because it really has multiple layers as Tanya gets set up. So when we talk about our annual budget, we are talking about two different buckets that we draw from. The first one is our operations budget, which really pays for our staff and their benefits and some of the programs that we offer. And then the other bucket is capital. And the capital budget is part of the permanent improvement levies that we have in place, but also really oriented towards maintaining our physical assets. And we have a 20-year plan that looks at every piece of concrete, asphalt, HVAC, roofing material, and the safety and security aspects of our district, including technology. So today we're going to give you a little bit of an idea of what we anticipate spending money on in year one, maybe a 3-year look, and then 5 years down the road, some of the things that we know that we're going to have to tackle, and some things that we should consider. So the first conversation is going to be from a facility standpoint, and then Glenn is going to talk about the technology component of our PI budget. But both of them fall into our PI or capital bucket of money that we spend. I just want to remind the board that although we can spend operating dollars on capital improvement, we cannot spend capital dollars on operating expenditures. Okay, it has to have a 5-year or more lifespan. Okay? I danced as long as I could until Tanya was ready. So here we go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown, for dancing. So this first slide is our budget, our allocations for next school year with our PI categories. So you'll see listed everything from concrete and asphalt, furniture, technology, and I have some safety and accessibility items on here as well. So the total there is roughly 1.4 million, and we have lots of needs in the district, and we'll go through those each individually with these categories. As we go through the slides, we have looked at, in each one of these categories, looking at those safety issues first. I mean, that is always a priority for us as we're planning what work needs to be done. So that's just look at these slides through that lens and know that that's what the filter has been.
The only other thing that I would add to that is when you look at that $1.4 million, if you remember prior to the levy campaign, we were spending about $1 million, and the plan calls for us to spend about $1.5 to $1.6 million annually. So the fact that we have $1.4 million is starting the phase up of that revenue source.
And that's actually not the entire budget.
Yeah.
There is additional spending for some maintenance items and some vehicles that are not part of that.
Okay, so this starts off the conversation about our concrete and our asphalt needs. And again, although that's not on the final slide that we look at, talking about safety and accessibility. Of course, as you drive around our district, you're going to find lots of needs for our asphalt and concrete. They're in every building, every parking lot, playgrounds, in the bus garage area of transportation. We need to put some concrete and some asphalt down to correct for some areas that are basically caving in, and it's causing a safety problem for our drivers getting in and out of the buses.
So the totals that you see there, 118,000. We're still waiting on some quotes. That's what the asterisk is for. And then we do have a budget for 215,000. So these were our high priority needs as we looked at concrete and asphalt across the district. Here are some pictures. These are taken at the high school and middle school. Some areas that definitely need some attention, and I'm sure you can identify some yourself as you've traveled across the district. Our flooring needs. We have been moving across the district the past several years, replacing carpet with our Forbo, and some teachers have Forbo in their classrooms now, and will tell you how wonderful it is as opposed to the carpet that we have. Right now, we identify the areas that are of highest need for replacing the carpet and moving into a Forbo situation based on really their safety and the condition of the carpet. Carpet is very challenging to maintain, and right now we have several areas in different buildings where it's actually coming up from the ground. The glue is basically coming loose and we're not adhering anymore, so it's a trip hazard for our students and our staff. What is Forbo? Forbo is
in the front entrance of this building, it's a vinyl / composite material that is pretty durable.
If you go around the school district, some of the rooms you might see something that kind of looks like hardwood floor. That's the design that we have. So it looks really nice and warm and inviting for the students. I think everyone has been very pleased with it. So our mechanical needs. As you know, and you've heard us say several times, our systems are aging. So we've worked recently with a local company to come in and assess our mechanical equipment and kind of put on a timeline when we should be replacing specific units and items. They looked most recently at, I think it was just honestly just a couple of weeks ago when it came in, but they looked at a plan to extend the life of some of the things that we were thinking about replacing earlier this year, so that we have better information on what we need to do to extend the life, replace what we need to, and repair those items as well. So again, we're still waiting some quotes for the variety of areas, but this is what we're looking at right now. And really, these are all, providing for a safe, secure learning environment to get these fixed and replaced.
And you will see, obviously, our total already exceeds the budgeted amount. One of the things that has occurred in this district for as long as I can be here is we've had to prioritize what we think is closest to failure, and then prioritize those needs. And sometimes we've done a really good job, and sometimes we have had more failures than we can accommodate. So obviously we will continue to adjust accordingly.
This is at the elementary school. These are rooftop units 14 and 15, both of which are scheduled to be replaced. They are currently looking into the gym, and they are 1997 model there, so they are failing. This is part of the basement at the elementary school. You can see that it is not in a favorable condition. It's on the Sunrise side, it's by that alley, and we are reaching out to structural engineers to help get some information on how we should proceed with this area and what we need to do and how we need to address it. So we've talked about obviously making some changes to the road, the alley that is above it, and then also an option maybe from our thoughts is to just fill in that section of the basement and seal it off. So we'll have a structural engineer give us some more informed information on what we need to do.
I didn't know there was a basement in the elementary school. Is that from the old teacher's lounge, or?
It is on the far end of the building, underneath a storage area near the music room. Yeah.
I would be happy to give you a tour.
No, that's too far.
I actually took some of these pictures. Frank had to really try to get me in there. I was not excited about it. Okay. Roofing roofs, we have here at the elementary school to do a shingle roof there on Sunrise, and that's a quote to do that work. We have the facility section of the elementary school where the facilities office is. That white maintenance building, I'm going to show you a picture of that right in just a few minutes. It has some natural skylights that look, that are not working for our storage area. More repairs at the high school, and then the soccer press box, we need to replace that roof, and then some miscellaneous roof repairs. So you can see there that our total is outweighing our budget. This is the soccer press box. This is the white building. Has anybody ever been inside that building? So you can see the natural skylights that I was talking about. It's really just one picture. I didn't want to, have 20 slides on this building. But anyway, the outside we can, power wash, and then we can paint that as well. But the inside is just deplorable, and we really can't even keep equipment in there because it's ruined. But we need the storage space, so we need to address that.
And for those residents that have been here long enough, that actually was the old locker room for the football stadium that used to be Harmon Field, right next where the Sunrise side of the elementary is. There used to be a football field there.
So what's the long-term plan for that building?
Well,
Depending on quotes.
yeah. What we would like to do is replace the roof, put gutters on it. There are no gutters right now. And then clean it up and utilize it as a storage area because we desperately need it for facilities. We have some things in there that we can store, but other things we just can't because the weather is coming in.
The storage there is just for the elementary school facility, or is the storage there also?
I'm sorry, for facilities, for the facilities department. Okay, so maintenance equipment. We need to replace Ford pickup. We would like to get a trailer for facilities for hauling various things around for mowing season and whatnot, and then we need a new snow blade. We're okay there with our budget. Our truck is in bad shape. The brakes and the transmission are failing. You can see the rust and the frame. It's not in good condition, and we need to replace those items.
Going along that line, one of the things that I have approached not only the township but also the village as they are building their new service facility complexes, that we could potentially store some of our vehicles under roof, which would be very helpful, even some of our equipment. There is a plan to put a light at Kendall, which would slow traffic down considerably in the future, which was one of our concerns about potentially co-locating there. But it is a topic of conversation. Not sure what they can do for us, but obviously when our vehicles are out in the elements, that's exactly what you get. So we're trying to work collaboratively and use taxpayer dollars wisely by sharing a resource.
So safety and accessibility. We just submitted today, Glenn worked on a grant for the Bureaus of Workers' Comp, safety grant to update our security cameras. We identified that as a need through our safety committee, so we were able to submit that grant today. We will also be purchasing shatterproof film through a safety grant with the Attorney General's office. And we actually already have the money for that, so we are going to put some film at the high school, the middle school, and the intermediate school in some areas that were peeling off, so we need to replace, and then also in some new areas. The door alarms we talked about, actually all these we talked about at our safety committee meeting. The door alarms we are going to also put in at the middle school and the high school. We're going to identify the areas that are most often left open and present the highest security problems for us, and we are going to put alarms on those doors first, and then we will budget out in future years for additional doors. Our track is in terrible condition. We are patching it for the spring season. But ultimately, it really needs to be replaced, resurfaced. We need to have that in our plan, and that is the estimates at $250,000. Our bleachers at the football stadium are not in good shape either. We spend roughly between $6,000 to $10,000 annually just to get those in a condition that we can have people seated in that area. So those ultimately need to be replaced. With the bleachers, we need to look at restrooms. We don't have, well, we put a portage on for handicap accessibility, for ADA compliance right now. But if we put in a new stadium, we also might be looking at some upgrades in numbers as far as how many restrooms we need to have. And of course, we need to upgrade the facilities for ADA compliance, which would include those handicap accessible restrooms.
And ramps.
And ramps.
Bleachers,
To
yeah.
the
Because right
schools.
now, we only have a small segment of our newer stadium, or home side bleachers that are handicap accessible.
And we're waiting on quotes for those two items. So that is what I have for you tonight. Do you have any questions?
Last time you said we're looking for a grant for the, is that going to cover that full expense of that? Full cost of the BWC safety grant? Is that going to cover the security cameras completely, or is that just a partial reimbursement?
That, Glenn, should cover everything that you have put together.
The grant is up to $40,000, and basically I requested everything up to $40,000. The way I tried to target it is I targeted all of the older analog cameras, of which we had a little over 50, and then there are a couple of areas specifically at the elementary that could use better coverage. All in all, we're replacing 72 cameras if the grant is approved. Right now, we have a little over 145 cameras total in the district, so we would be replacing approximately half of them. And I would be very, I guess, excited about the prospect of getting there, because we would basically remove all the old analog cameras, and we would be in a position where I'd be very confident that we had the coverage we need, and the cameras would be visible, and we could actually see the content on them. Some of them are so fuzzy, even when we go back to the video to investigate situations, it's not always clear what we're looking at.
Tanya, on the safety and accessibility issues, and you're prioritizing, as you indicated,
Absolutely.
safety and accessibility, are there things, this is the one-year list, are there things on the 3- and 5-year list that you're concerned about that might need to move up, or are you confident that over that period of time we'll be able to address the things that are important?
So I think that some of the items, obviously for budgetary reasons, we won't be able to get to this year. So I think those would fall on priorities for the next year for us. And then I do feel comfortable with our most recent assessment with a company that we worked with, that they provided for free, by the way, the assessment. I feel very comfortable with the information they've given us for the next 2 to 3 years. And then, of course, we have our 20-year plan for financial budgeting, so that's, I feel good.
And so, as Jeff indicated, you're in sort of a catch-up phase now, increasing the budget honestly over time in order to deal with those things that we put off in the past.
And from a public standpoint, I want to be crystal clear about, what we view as safety and accessibility. Because there are some items on that list that we want to, identify and share with the board that, one, we're currently trying to maintain them, but they are end of life and need replacement. Whether that's in year 1 or year 3 or year 5, there's something that the board is going to have to address, and some of them are bigger ticket items.
Well, we know from experience that some things that we're budgeting 3 years from now are actually going to fail next year and will have to be replaced.
That is absolutely true.
Process.
Yes, it is.
It seems like there's some various expertise in the community around operations and facilities and things like that. You had a chance to vet this, like the operations committee, or as we start to do more capital projects, have you thought about re-energizing or recruiting for that, or what are your thoughts on how to get more community input to the plan as well as contributions to the decision?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I plan to do that at our next operations committee meeting, which I believe I'm scheduling for, it's in May. I don't want to particularly say what date it is, since I don't have its memory. But I definitely think we will need their expertise, specifically dealing with the basement issue. They might have some contacts for us, for structural engineers, so.
So now we'll shift away from some of our physical assets to our technology assets, and Glenn kind of talked a little bit about the security cameras that are in place now, but I think you'll get a sense of the technology infrastructure and devices that we have in our district and the forecast for the next 5 years.
Well, it's been a little bit. It's been about 2 years since we took off on one-to-one, and some things have moved forward quite rapidly. But I thought I'd start with introducing you to the team in case everybody isn't familiar with everybody. Beth Dunham and Linda Wicks both serve as technology coaches at the intermediate and elementary school. Eric Thompson, I said he maintains the boxes, blinky lights, and wires. Not meant to be degrading in any way. If he does his job well, no one knows about all the stuff that's in the background. Evan McCullough, short timer. Evan, unfortunately, is going to be leaving us, but he has been a great asset, and hopefully we will find somebody of his caliber to replace him. So this is my little homage to Mr. Sobel. I said I didn't reach the level of the Sobel process. I really went through on some of these. When I'm talking about a general education classroom, I went through on maps and I went 1, 2, 3. So if it really is something like we're talking interactive boards, the numbers are very close, but they might be 1 or 2 off. I didn't actually go through and count how many of our support staff is compared to a gen ed teacher or intervention specialist. 5 buildings, 141 gen ed classrooms. By no means does that account for all of our teachers, 246 staff. This is way beyond how many staff members we have as far as teachers, but anybody that's issued an actual staff laptop is what's included in this number. We've been pretty generous with this count, so even secretaries traditionally have been given laptops over the past few years because a lot of their job is requiring them to do work, oftentimes in the evenings, and it's giving them more flexibility for their work. Students, that number is a little tiny inflated because it includes some of the other students that possibly don't actually go to Granville but are under our charge. I think our total count is 2480, something like that.
Yeah, just under 2,500 actually here.
So the infrastructure, what actually comes and makes a part of the district, what actually runs everything that we run. We have 16 network closets. That's just where all of the wires come and connect so that we have connectivity between everything else that's being connected. Servers, we're looking at 32 virtual servers. It just means we are literally making sort of a pretend server off of one physical server. So in our case, the number below, the 13 physical servers, 4 of those are what we call core servers. One of those cores might run on average 10 virtual servers. It allows us to get a lot more computing, a lot more specialized servers rather than continually going out and paying another $10,000 every time we want another server. It also uses a lot less energy that way. Cloud suites in Granville, we run 2 Office suites. Office 365 is our primary suite, but we still run Google. Google has become more and more critical because of the students using Chromebooks. It also has allowed the staff a lot more flexibility. So it's not me demanding you have to use Office 365. If a teacher has a resource that they want to use that happens to be a Google slide presentation or something like that, they can. They're not, forced in one direction or the other. Same thing with the students. They have the flexibility to go back and forth. And most of the students are very easily moving back and forth between the 2 suites depending on the actual projects they're working on.
Is there a cost of having those 2 office suites effectively? Or what?
It's a really good question. So we don't pay anything for Google. Google has actually released an additional charge for Google for Education, which they now call G Suite. We could pay an additional charge, but really we wouldn't benefit much from the services that would fall under the additional service charge. So in our case, Google is still free to the district. Office 365 technically is also free, but the district pays about $17,000 a year total cost, and that includes all of our server operating systems, any of the support for our Windows-based computers, and any of the other software that we might use like Office and that type of thing. The appliances, these are basically specialized boxes. They are a server, but they don't run Windows Server necessarily. A lot of times they're Linux-based machines, and they're very, very specific in what they do. The web filter is a perfect example. Email archiver. Aristotle is a tool that helps us audit student and staff activity. Load balancer, it really is a balancing device. It balances traffic. But that's just a sampling of those. We have quite a few of them. The connections between the districts, we have private fiber connecting all of the buildings, and then our lease line goes out to the internet. Right now we have 300 megabit, which has been perfect for this district. The only time we ever see a peak above that level is during testing. And it really does peak right at the beginning of when all the kids connect, and then it immediately diminishes down to about 240, even when we're testing about 1,000 kids at a time. This next year, we're actually renewing our connection. It'll go up to 500 megabits, which should be perfect for where we are even for the next few years. HVAC, this is going back to Tanya. We actually host 2 servers that are specialized for our HVAC purposes. I don't actually know who, as far as the company, is managing them. It's Amoresco/BCI. But it helps us to both get data out from a reporting standpoint, and it's also their point of access for managing our HVAC systems. That is not managed by my staff, although it resides on our network. Web services, these are becoming more and more common. Schoology, ClassLink, eSchoolView, Adobe, and lynda.com. We use a lot of paid services. Hey, we want to do this specific thing. We want to edit graphic documents, that type of thing. And we pay for some of these. Wireless, we have 290 access points in the district. Essentially, every single classroom has an access point, and most of the general population areas. Anytime we think about the MTRs, the gymnasiums, the hallways, that type of thing, there shouldn't be any areas in Granville now that do not have an access point. To that effect, we even have a long-range access point that was placed in the land lab. It'll actually reach halfway across the land lab, and we have one being installed on the front of the elementary for the attendance system that they had put in this past year. I guess current year. Refresh cycles, this is probably what everybody is interested in. Servers and switches, these are evaluated every year. We don't really say every 4 years, let's go out and spend a big chunk of money and get rid of everything. It really is depending on when we need to refresh individual systems is when a new server would be bought. And as far as all of our network here, it's all HP. HP has a lifetime warranty. So if one of them fails, they send me a new one the next day. There really is no reason to replace any of this equipment until we outgrow it. So we look forward every year and say, what is going to be placed in our network? And we'll evaluate whether we need to buy new equipment or not. Future laptops, this is staff laptops of any kind. 4 years is my ideal time frame, but the past 2 refreshes have gone 5 years. If it goes past 5 years, we're going to have a lot of fatigue problems within the individual computers, but 4 years would be a perfect number for me. Desktop computers, 6 years is ideal. In the case of desktop computers, we've actually had them go as long as 10. It depends on if they were purchased refurbished as compared to new, that type of thing. You'll see in a later slide, the middle school tech room of all places is very old equipment. It's 8 or 9 years old at this point, and it's going to be replaced this next year. Chromebook, This is 4 years, and this is mandated by Google's AUE. It's their auto update expiration. All of this little tiny print, I guess it's pretty small on this slide. Basically, Google has amended this a little over the past year. It used to be 4 years, so you bought a Chromebook and Google would auto update it, meaning we manage it and we don't have to do anything. So as long as it's linked inside our management console, it will continue to get updates. So when a new version of the Chrome OS comes out, if we have new apps, it will update on its own. The problem is they set a deadline for this. In our case, the computers that we bought 2 years ago are going end of life essentially in 2 years. Now they've extended this out to 6.5, but I haven't seen any computers on the market right now that are actually reaching that blink. The problem is it's from a manufacturing time, so it truly is from the date that the equipment starts to be manufactured, and it's also a little dangerous. You have to be very careful that you're not buying last year's model of anything, because the clock has already started ticking on how long you can use that. Now, as compared to a home environment, it doesn't matter, because you could just click the update button, but you'll see here, we have over 2,400 Chromebooks. It's just too much labor to go to every single Chromebook, wait for it to update, and go through the process. So this definitely factors into our lifespan of the Chromebooks. These are Chromebook transitions. So this slide was really put in place to try to describe my overall refresh strategy for one-to-one. So in 2018, we bought 6 grade levels total of computers. You'll see the ones out of 8th grade, when we moved into this calendar year, they moved to that little stack of books. For our purposes, we're going to pretend that's the elementary and the intermediate school, which is where I actually moved those computers. In 2019, the little price tag, or my little icon next to 9th grade, meant that I had to buy new computers for the 9th graders. My goal is to always give the 9th graders brand new computers. The thought is that we end of life when they're seniors and they just take them with them. So when we get to the year 2021, all of those kids should be taking their computers home with them. If you follow the 9th grader to the 10th, 11th, and 12th, and then we get a little arrow off the top, assuming that the kids want them, the district will have basically depreciated those devices, and we should be able to work out something where they can travel with the students. At the very least, it would be a very low-cost option for the students, and it's really a very limited value to the district to keep them, once again, because we can't update them automatically. The 2 toolboxes at the bottom, coming off of 2019 and 2020, this is a little bit awkward situation because of the fact that we bought all the Chromebooks in one giant chunk. There's no way I can really push them into classrooms because I can't maintain that many devices over time. We can't just keep pushing the number up. We're actually already sort of at a saturation point. So the devices coming out, a couple hundred each year, are going to go into basically a surplus where anything that's needed in classrooms, they would obviously go there, and they'll also act as basically a pool of spares for whenever anything goes wrong with our devices, and could even support our one-to-one initiative for the 9th through 12th graders that have those devices. Is there any question about this slide? Teacher laptops, once again, I'm just saying that 4 years is ideal. If you look at the buildings in the bottom left, if we combine the transportation with the intermediate school and the district office staff with the middle school, we get roughly equal counts. In my perfect world, I would really like to refresh the devices, specifically teacher laptops, 1 building per year. It works out pretty well financially for us. Unfortunately for us, going all the way back to basically when I started, we've usually bought teacher laptops in 2-year increments. So we bought all of the devices for the entire district over 2 years, and it is a huge dollar amount that would be better spread across a few years. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to hold off when I talk about perfect being 4. The middle school and the high school specifically will have to go to 5 years in cases depending on what their device is. They'll always have a usable device. It won't be that we're going to give them really antiquated equipment, but it will be a little bit older than I'd like it to be. So classroom support, this gets into all of the other little pieces that make up the things that the teachers use and they depend on every single day that we don't really consider and we probably forget about. The very first thing, and it's actually one of our most expensive, interactive boards and displays. So this is the traditional smart board that you go up and you touch, or it just works as a projection surface. Projectors that hang from the ceiling or are on a cart. And then now we basically have been putting what amount to very large televisions in rooms, and they're also interactive. So most of them, we just put 8 of them in the elementary. They're called interactive displays. You can go up and touch them and manipulate them just like you can interactive board. Projectors and displays, this is just 2 items that basically mean the same thing. One of them is interactive, one of them isn't. So one of them I can touch, one of them I can't. Phones. All of our phones are IP-based phones, and they have a fairly significant cost attached to them. All of our phones were purchased in 2011. They're now 8 years old. This is another one of those things we really don't have a refresh cycle for. It'd be very comparable to Tanya planning for something, but we're not really going to replace it unless it breaks. A phone doesn't get less effective, even though it might be 15 years old. But if you pick up the handset and it doesn't work, we need another one. So we always have to account for the ability to put a phone in a classroom if needed. DVD players, I can't really believe that I'm putting that out there, but a lot of teachers still have DVD/VHS players. Printers in the past have been a fairly large dollar item for the district. We have a lot of classroom printers across the district. And there's been a lot of need for them in the past, but we are trying to mitigate, trying to get rid of them as they die. We're not trying to actively remove them from classrooms, but trying not to replace them as common. Document cameras, does everybody know what a document camera is? Basically, it really is a camera, usually on a boom arm. So if you're my age or older, you remember your teachers writing on transparencies and would be projected on the wall. They're the modern version of that. So they can be standalone or they can connect to a computer, and they'll allow them to, for example, open a book to a particular page and project it for their kids. The cool thing about this is if they want to connect it to their computer, then they get all the annotation features. They can use it for 3D solids, that type of thing. So it's way beyond my example of an overhead projector. But those two are going to need to be replaced in mass. So software and services, we'll go really quick through this. This goes back to my previous point. There are a lot of services that the district purchases. Obviously, Schoology would be one that would probably stick out in everybody's mind. That by no means is probably the most expensive service that we actually purchase, but certainly something almost all of the teachers use. The Adobe Creative Suite is something that really drug my feet on this year, but is used by virtually every teacher in the district. And it's probably one of those suites that will stay around. I don't really like the way that Adobe prices their software. It's sort of a take it or leave it type of model, but they do have a best-in-class software and will probably continue to use it. On the website, there are a lot of individual certificates that keep our data protected, moving back and forth. We have hosting, we have external connections, so there are some ancillary costs with that. K-12 Insight is Aristotle. That is going back to our auditing software. It just allows us to keep our kids safe. If there's ever a question about the activity on a staff or a student's computer, I can go back and get it out of that system. ClassLink is a single sign-on dashboard. Especially at the elementary, this has been sort of my dream. The kids, even a very young kid, logs on one time, and then inside of that, it's automatically logged into all the other sites. So the idea is it always stores or has the ability to know a student's username and password so that a kid, especially a 6-year-old, doesn't have to get beat up typing in a very long, perhaps email address and trying to remember some kind of obscure password. Microsoft, this is simply Office 365, but we also have all of the software that runs our laptops and our servers, our deployment systems, on and on and on. WeVideo is an example of a newer suite we actually offer. This came about strictly because of Chromebooks. I didn't think that Chromebooks would ever really be used for graphic editing and video. WeVideo is definitely one of those software packages / website that is proving me wrong. The kids love it, the teachers love it. We bought enough to basically cover about half of the district, so it's covering our older kids. Although we haven't said it's only available for kids 7 through 12, that's primarily where it's being used, and it's been a very popular service. Lynda.com is going the way of the dodo bird. It was purchased by Microsoft, then it became LinkedIn Learning, and it is officially come to our attention that LinkedIn Learning will not be available for K-12. That's really unfortunate because it's been a great resource for us. It's probably been one of the most used video resources we've had, but we're going to have to look for something else to take its place. Security, this is all the software that takes care of all of our security cameras, that kind of thing. So getting back to the numbers. Basically, I just broke it down into 4 individual categories. The numbers that you're probably going to want to pay the closest attention to are the 2021 column. 2021 ends up being the perfect storm for the technology department. This is where we end up having to buy a lot of staff laptops, and we also have the largest purchase of Chromebooks coming into life because of our first purchase with one-to-one. After we get past 2021, everything calms down and we get to more of a normal rhythm as far as our cost. So it will be much more standard. If you look at, I actually didn't include it, but we could get the numbers from Mike. The numbers are very much in line with what Mike has for our capital budget if we look at 2022, 2023, but 2021 is definitely above Mike's budget. If we go into the details of these individual ones, 2020, we actually do have some traditional labs that need replaced. The elementary lab and the high school language lab, both of those right now are labs of desktop computers. I don't see desktops going back in either place. We'll get laptops so they're a more flexible space. It also allows the district to move if we have to. So if, for example, we have a huge influx of students that come into the elementary and that space has to be used as a classroom, we could consider a mobile computer lab or something like that. The language lab is also a beautiful classroom space in high school. I don't think they need it today, but it's always possible that they will down the road. Office desktops, that really is just all of the people on our staff that truly do work in that office space. It could be anything from a secretary to an athletic director or myself. All of those desktops also have to be replaced over time in middle school art. There are a bunch of little tiny labs that'll come in. Like Sarah Sharp's room only has 3, but she uses them for specialized activities with her kids. Yearbook, I think, only has 6 or 7. So some of those labs are very small, but they still have to be refreshed over time. On the right-hand side, you'll see staff laptops, classroom desktops, and classroom workstations. Classroom workstations specifically, I'm referring to a desktop that probably has a little bit beyond what we would buy, even myself, for a desktop. It's going to have a much higher graphics card. Those are the type of computers that I want to put in like Craig Wenning's room at the high school for high school tech, Christian Lanke at the middle school, anybody that's going to run CAD/CAM software, that type of thing. We're going to want a little bit bigger computer than we're normally going to put in an office space. Classroom desktops, they're pretty much run-of-the-mill desktops. And then staff laptops, I actually shoot a little bit above the middle because, once again, I want to make sure that they can last through 5 years if we have to push them that long. Traditionally, we buy business class laptops and we haven't had a problem with them lasting that long. When we have had more of the consumer grade laptops, when you get into a 4-year-old laptop that is used the way it is in our business, where it's open and closed 20 times a day, you start seeing a lot of things fail, even the hinges break off of them and that type of thing.
Is that right, that costs that $1,400 per laptop, but even for a business class laptop, it seems kind of pricey if you're buying.
It is, and I will admit that. The individual laptops that we bought the past 2 years have been right at $1,400. The staff has grown very accustomed to having usually a convertible laptop as well as a touch laptop. We could certainly pull back on that. It's just what they have had in the past. Giving them touch capabilities on the screen, that really doesn't affect the cost that much. It's usually about $60 to $70. But having a convertible form factor, like this particular computer is what we gave the elementary staff this past year. You can actually fold the screen all the way back on itself, so you can use it more like a tablet right on the screen. You can put it up in what they call tent mode, where you can just basically tip it up on its edge so that you could just leave it up almost like it's on a kiosk type of stand. But I agree with you, Thomas, it is very pricey. If you ask Mr. Brown, he's asking me why I can't buy everybody Apple computers. And I've suggested that they're even more expensive. Chromebooks and classroom support, these are just the individual line items. Panel sports projectors, they usually run about $3,500 a piece. The actual amounts or the costs are down the right-hand side to give you an idea. The one that really sticks in my craw is document cameras. The teachers really don't want to connect document cameras to their laptops. So I can get a low-end document camera that has to be connected to a teacher's laptop for about $100. As soon as you go to something that's capable of standing on its own, it's connected to a projector. I'm over here as a teacher and I'm going to do my attendance in the morning. It's a completely different animal, and the lowest cost is usually about $350. And they go way up into like the $700 range. They really are just a camera that has the ability to transmit video back, but they can cost as much as a laptop. The ones that I'm looking at right now are Vision, and they really are right at $400. Mobile cards, that's a silly thing, but we have to have a place to store all of our Chromebooks or tablets. Those are usually about $1,500 fees. Chromebooks actually vary quite a bit in cost. Acer is a very, very popular brand right now. Acer's price point to get into an actual device is about $280, and then we add on another $25 for a management license. Right now, we've been buying Lenovo laptops, which is probably what I'll buy again this year, for $200. So with the management license, that's at $225. So this is definitely a cost. Again, you can buy a $1,500 Chromebook if you want. You get into Acer's line, they have convertible, they have touch Chromebooks. I haven't been able to justify the cost so far, but that number could fluctuate a lot, either a little bit lower or much, much higher depending on what we thought the kids needed. Security cameras, this is one of the numbers that's actually coming down. We've actually changed vendors recently, which is bringing that number to almost half. As part of working on the grant with Tanya, I've decided that Axis cameras make more sense in our district as compared to Sony or Bosch, which are the other two brands that we use. And they're about half the cost, and I think they provide just as good a coverage for our systems. Down on the bottom right, after 2021, I know this is a ridiculous figure, but we can expect a yearly replacement cost for the Chromebooks to be about $134,000 to $140,000. What I am proposing, and really where we are already at, is basically being one-to-one, either on a classroom basis or truly the students taking them home, like we are in grades 7 through 12, for every single class, grades 2 through 12. I'm not currently a huge proponent of putting technology in kindergarten and first. They have technology in the way of tablets. All of the teachers have a tremendous amount of technology for themselves. But we get into some weird issues when we get down into that grade level. Kindergartners are a perfect example. They go to try to learn how to type. They don't recognize the keys on a keyboard because they're all capital and they're only recognizing the lowercase letters. So right now we do have technology, but I'm still not seeing it in the same way that we're seeing every single classroom. It has to have an entire set of computers that's going to cover every single kid's. Kindergarten and first are not using them that way currently, and I'm confident that those teachers are going to continue to talk with me and tell me what they need or what their limitations are as far as during their instruction. And I think that brings us to the end. Any questions? I know I went through that very fast.
On the last screen, what's spares plus fill?
So spares plus fill is really exactly that. So spares is whatever I use. So a student comes to me with, hey, I broke my screen today. They give it to me, I give them one in exchange until I fix their device. And then when their device is fixed, we just exchange back. So usually I've been figuring about 10%. This year, our breakage rate has gone through the ceiling. Last year, we were a little less than 5%. This year to date, we've already had over 10% of the kids in 7 through 12 break their screens, which is way higher than I'd like it to be. Financially, it's still doable, but there's obviously a labor and a time cost associated with trying to figure out how to broker the devices back and forth, how to get them replaced as well. So I figure it's about 200 devices. When I'm talking about fill, I usually am talking about an oversight on my part. So, you know, Janine comes to me and says, Glenn, I don't have any computers in my room. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, usually it's some teacher didn't have the resources that I thought she had. 2 of the devices left 2 years ago and they're just quiet and they never said anything about them. They fell off of our radar. A teacher realizes that she'd like to do center work, but she really only has enough to do like 3 groups. Ideally, she'd like to move it out to 6 groups, so we try to fill it out with a couple more devices. It's just the slack needed to allow our teachers to move up or down depending on what resources they need.
On the spares, is that, I mean, if you're seeing a jump up, is that due to the treatment of the computer by the students, or is it the computer, or?
I would say it's our students. The students generally put the Chromebook on top of their books and they treat it just like a book. So the kids don't pay attention necessarily and they go and they just throw them down next to their locker and then they watch their laptop bounce off. A lot of it is very innocent. I mean, it's not like the kids are playing Frisbee with them, but I think it's just not really paying attention. Oh my goodness, I have this Chromebook I carry back and forth, but they really do most of the time treat them like a book.
It's the first time I've kind of thought about elementary school grades kind of 2 through 6 being sort of one-to-one with technology with a Chromebook, right? Is that kind of the way that we're thinking about it? Is that we're having computers for kids individually, or these are sort of still carts that are available, or that's just like, I mean, I know we were committed, you know, for 7-12, and I didn't know we were sort of looking in the same model, and if there's any difference in that model, what you do elementary school with one-to-one technology.
It definitely varies when you're talking about how the computers are spread out. So we're definitely talking classroom sets of computers. The way this has happened, Thomas, is it just happened because we already had sets of computers. So if we take the intermediate school, for example, we have roughly 8 classrooms in each pod. Before last year, we had at least 4 of those classrooms covered with carts. So usually there was 1 cart per 2 classrooms, and they shared. Then we had some curriculum needs, at least in the 4th grade, that required us to buy a few more, and that took it to 6 labs, at least in the 4th grade. And then this last year, because of some of the devices coming out of the high school of the one-to-one program, I moved those partially into the elementary and partially into the intermediate. So in this case, 6th grade became one-to-one over this last year. And 6th grade also was very, very close because, once again, because of the curriculum materials, we already had one teacher that had an additional card. So they had 5 cards already, so really I just added 90 computers. So it's something that's been a little bit organic as far as its growth. I can tell you for sure that 3rd grade and up, the teachers are using them daily. Now, if you have concerns more along the lines of my comments about kindergarten and 1st grade, then yes, that's a very valuable conversation to have.
I think it's totally cool that we've got more technology and stuff like that. I just think we need to be like really intentional with like making sure that we kind of know that and the staff is counting on it and we have the tools from the staff perspective to be able to use them like as a one-to-one device as opposed to like, gotta get a laptop card today. I think it's wonderful that we're starting to integrate that, but I think how we phase that in
number
from a
one
curriculum
thing that we
perspective
heard
is
from
important.
teachers is, I had this, concept that I wanted to explore, but I had to sign up a day before to get the cards, but I missed the teachable moment because I didn't have the technology available. I think more readily available it is, they're gonna capture those opportunities. I think the difference for us is, keeping those computers in-house versus letting them go. And we are very cautious about students at the lower grades being able to take something with them. I think those are going to be classroom sets but available daily to the students for learning.
There's an economic impact too, because we have a $40 per year Chromebook fee for the ones that they can take home, whereas if we have a classroom set, we don't necessarily have that. And I'm not sure we want to institute that kind of one-to-one mentality at the lower grades for reasons that they're not going to be able to take them on their backpack, or they're going to get lost, or there's going to be other issues with them. But it's interesting to think about that.
Through this entire process, one of the things that we didn't necessarily capture is as the cost for Chromebooks and other things are going up, we've also dropped the amount of money that we're spending on textbooks, which are a static purchase. The minute you buy them, they're out of date. So, there's been a corresponding drop. It's not the same, but it's significant.
And Mike, do the Chromebook fees that we charge roll back into this budget somehow directly and offset it?
Yeah, they're used to replace, and if money builds up, we're able to use it to replace some, and might use some of the new Chromebooks.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Like, can you switch the deck next time?
Absolutely, thank you.
So this is our time in the year that we start looking at board policies, and OSBA, which is your Ohio School Boards Association, gives us a list of policies that you should consider based on any legislative action or federal changes. And so we have a list of a couple of different policies that I'd like to highlight for you, and then kind of talk a little bit about some others that we think we should probably consider. So the first one is qualifications and duties of the treasurer. I think that's kind of timely. Their recommended change for this is just in the job description, removing the responsibility for filing and maintaining licenses. That is no longer in the responsibility of the treasurer's office. They've allocated that to me. So, thank you, General. So,
Mike's parting gift.
yes, Mike's parting gift. The next item is the administration of federal grant funds. If you remember in November when we did our last policy update, there was a procurement policy that we adopted that was related to the $50,000 threshold and the bid requirements. This aligns with the federal grant requirement to not only align with our procurement policy, but it also adds some equal employment opportunity language as well, all both federally required. So this is not a permissible policy, it is required by law. Next item is staff or bonded employees and officers. There is, Mike, do you want to explain this? 'Cause it's probably better for you to talk about this than me.
Yeah, but there's always a requirement for the treasurer to be bonded separately from everybody else. And the changes that were made as House Bill 491, I think it was, that eased some of the restrictions, basically making, the big ones making treasurers liable if the superintendent hired somebody who wasn't qualified for their position, and we paid them, it came back on us, not the superintendent. But that's all changed. But one is, they gave an option for an alternate way of doing the bonding, where it's sort of a different mechanism than a traditional bond. We have to choose which of the two we are going to do, whether it's traditional or the new one. I've had just a very brief interaction with someone about the implications of the new one, who told me at this point they're waiting for guidance from the auditor of state on several issues. So I'm kind of leaning towards keeping the policy we already have in place, but it's mostly around bonding.
What's the annual cost of bonding for individuals that we have related to this?
For everyone besides the treasurer, it's part of our blanket liability insurance. For the treasurer, honestly, it's a 5-year bond, and mine was last paid 5 years ago because my bond is up this year, and I honestly don't remember, and we've just started looking into it.
It's not much, right? Because there's not a lot of risk there.
I honestly, I really don't remember. Yep. You remember? I don't remember. Yeah, because again, it's been 5 years since we've had to pay it. So I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. I've just started looking into the process of switching bonds right now.
We can get that figured.
Yeah.
The next item is staff conduct. It really has nothing to do with staff conduct. It's also related to public conduct on district property. Senate Bill 199 amended the concealed carry provisions in Ohio. And prior to this bill, weapons were not allowed on school property at all. And now concealed carry licensees are allowed to keep their arm or their weapon in their car locked, and according to the concealed carry language that is in this document. So that's related to staff and public. So
That supersedes local policy.
it does supersede local policy. You do not have a decision. You must comply with this policy. They have to stay in the car. It does pose some questions for us related to our safety plans. We'll work with Homeland Security because, we don't necessarily police people coming and going during events in a way that we feel comfortable that we can say, hey, they didn't go out to their car for a specific reason. So I think it poses some challenges for our safety committee who meets this week to consider.
Special parking lots.
The next item is student absences and excuse and student attendance and accounting. House Bill 66 was a byproduct of the unfortunate death of a young child up in Cleveland that was abducted 2 years ago, and the parent thought that she got on the bus, she was abducted, and the reporting mechanism and the timing of the school district notifying the parent was significant. So there was policy developed in the General Assembly with the requirement for us to notify and contact parents within 120 minutes of the start of the school day, which sounds like a very large period of time, but what you will find when you look at the data is our students come and go at regular times and intervals, especially at the high school with their different schedules. So it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but we've been working with School Messenger, who is the group that provides my ability to contact all parents on
snow days. So they have a feature called Safe Arrival that is a little bit more of a, I would say, a more streamlined process for parents to notify the school district in a timely fashion about an absence. And it connects directly to our notification mechanism, so we can automate that process and make sure that those calls go out in a timely fashion. But that is a requirement of law. That's both of those policies. OSBA is recommending that you continue to update your use of electronic communications equipment by students, meaning your cell phone policy. And if you are going to prohibit or restrict the use of cell phones, that you have this policy in place. As you know, that we do at the middle school and high school restrict their use because the teacher is responsible for notifying the student when they can use that device. Technically, that's considered a restriction. So we have to have this policy in place. Student suspensions. Get down to that. Okay. Student suspensions and expulsions. There was also a bill that was passed during lame duck that if a student is suspended or expelled, they have to be given at least partial credit for their academics during that time that they are suspended or expelled. It actually aligns very much with what we currently do as far as practice. We don't want behavior to necessarily impact their grade or their ability to learn, but we do want them to serve a consequence related to the behavior, kind of along the lines of a natural consequence. So we have to develop written procedures for completing and grading these assignments according to what is in Ohio law. It also, in the same bill, identified that students K through 3 are no longer allowed to be suspended or expelled, except for some specifically identified circumstances. There were circumstances that apparently happened around the state where a young student was being suspended for maybe something related to a dangerous weapon, but no one would consider that a dangerous weapon, like pointing your finger like that I just did, considered being a dangerous or a threatening device. So yes, common sense needs to prevail, sometimes it does not. So that's why the General Assembly creates policies like this. So we always take, or we try to take a common sense approach, but there are stipulations in the policy for reduction of what they consider Type 3 offenses, which are classified as some of the most aggressive types of behavior. Again, mandatory. Also, there's been an emphasis on youth suicide awareness. So there's a requirement for mandatory training. You're going to actually see in a little bit, we have another policy. We were a little bit ahead of the game related to this because our Wellbeing Task Force had identified the need for a suicide prevention policy. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We have been working on our students who are gifted the second reading. If you remember, we streamlined that policy to align with what was happening as far as practice and the new model standards. So that's the second reading of that, but we will include it in the final adoption when you vote at your next meeting. And then public conduct, I've already talked about. That is related to the concealed carry as well. So let's get into facility naming rights and prevention policy. So one of the things that we do not currently have in our board policy is if an individual or corporation wanted to identify something that they would for a certain amount of money, place their name on and upgrade that facility. We don't currently have a board policy that says we can do that. What I'm advocating for is when we're getting into that notion of a public-private partnership, that we should probably have a policy that guides some of our thinking and behavior related to that. Again, policy is constructed in a general fashion, which gives you the ability to make specific decisions. So again, anytime that is occurring, we also have a corresponding acceptance of a gift that is a little bit more specific. A perfect example would be the hitting facility that was donated. That individual who was an anonymous donor did not want to put their name on the building, but if they did, we would have had to put this policy in place and then direct him accordingly. I'm recommending that we put together or do the first reading and second reading of a facility naming right policy. And then the final item that I would talk about is the samples youth suicide prevention policy. And this policy has three parts. It has the general policy that would be included in your board policy documents. Then it would have kind of a prevention component, which is really related to what we do from an education standpoint and a procedures for if an event were to occur. So kind of the regulations and guidance of how the administration would perform in the unfortunate circumstance of either an attempted suicide or a suicide, and how to work with the students and parents specifically. And then the last part of the policy would include sample handbook language that would be, quite honestly, a reference for parents and students who might encounter a friend, colleague, parent, or a student that are contemplating suicide, and some resources that are available from an education standpoint. We are a little bit ahead of the game from an education standpoint. Our Too Good for Drugs curriculum does spend a lot of time on some of the precursor indications of at-risk behavior, and specifically at-risk for suicide. But we've been partnering with Nationwide Children's Hospital on the Signs of Suicide curriculum that is really a 7-12 policy, or 7-12 curriculum. We had two separate curriculums happening, one at the middle school and one at the high school. This would combine and make it standard 7 through 12. Obviously, the language that we use K through 6 is very different than what we do at 7 through 12. So this is the first reading. This is the result of a conversation that started 2 years ago during the Wellbeing Task Force. If you remember, Kate Guiney came and gave you a presentation about a recommendation for this policy. This is coming to fruition. I wish Kate was here. She's traveling abroad still. So, but this has gone through the Wellbeing Task Force, the Whole Child Committee, our school counselors, our leadership team, and now your review. So pretty comprehensive process because it is a sensitive topic and requiring a lot of oversight. So that is kind of a rundown of the first read of the recommended policies. So questions?
Can you speak a little bit about how you, on the prevention policy, suicide prevention policy adopted, how you see that implementation going, specifically education in the classroom, training of the staff, and how you build that out?
Yeah. So that would be the partnership with Nationwide Children's Hospital. They have trainers that will come out to your district and train staff specifically on the recommendations of how to embed this curriculum into different course offerings. We don't want it to just be in health because, quite honestly, a lot of our kids bypass health and do it online. So we want it to be more of a universal type curriculum and discussion point. And honestly, it kind of aligns with the see something, say something. mentality of if you have a person struggling, connecting them to resources and making sure that those resources are consistently applied. So there's obviously a staff component, but then there's also the student component of what's actually taught in the classroom.
And I think it's critical that you take it out of the classroom and bring it into the mainstream. The other thing I'd love to see us look at is how we involve parents and the broader community in that rollout, and how we share that information and really create not only more awareness, but more training throughout the community for anybody who's interested in that.
If you remember, we've partnered with Mental Health of America, we've partnered with LAP at times to kind of do mental health first aid with all of our staff. But I agree with you, it requires a community effort. We have some great partners in the churches that are in this area. We have the resources that are offered in Lincoln County, some in Franklin County like Nationwide Children's Hospital. But this is a topic, unfortunately, that is too close to home right now. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to build an understanding of this issue, and that requires parent involvement.
Thank you. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much. You will get the second reading in your April meeting. Everybody wake up. Lights came on.
Mike, are you participate?
Yep. This is the slide we load tech. In your folders, you have a one-page summary for pay to participate. What this is doing is just laying out, we've discussed several options, and this is just to frame the discussion for pay to participate. There's no recommendations in here. This is just informational. Kind of overview where we are right now. The five-year forecast assumes that pay to participate would generate $167,000 this year for the district. As of last Thursday, it had generated $160,500, so very close to the projection. We'll still try to get a little bit more money in for the spring sports as those continue to ramp up. So that's where we are. What we looked at going forward were 4 different options for what to do with pay to participate, beginning with the 2019-2020 school year. And what you have on the document is just the aggregate summary of what it would mean to the budget in any of these cases. The first is to eliminate pay to participate beginning in the fall. So there will be no pay to participate for the 19-20 school year. The cumulative impact over the course of the final 4 years of the 5-year forecast would be $620,000 reduction. The second option is to eliminate the pay to participate over 2 years, presumably cut it in half the first year, completely eliminate the second year. That would have an impact of $542,500. The third would be to eliminate the pay to participate entirely, beginning with the 19-20 school year, but also at the same time increase the general activity fee from the current $75 to $100. That would net a loss over 4 years of $560,000 for the last 4 years of the forecast. And the final option, which we put together, is to reduce the pay to participate fee in half, so half of where it was this year, but expand it to include non-athletics, competition, non-athletics, primarily we're talking about drama and marching band. And that would have a net impact on the budget of a loss of $230,000 over the final 4 years.
But would require an academic change.
It would require,
Because we would no longer be allowed to offer a grade for those top part of those courses. So you remember this was a byproduct of a conversation that we had in our last meeting about looking at different options. So you have several that have been modeled as far as the impact on the 5-year forecast.
We have an idea of the percentage percentage of students in the high school that are paying the pay to participate fee one time. I assume there are multiple students paying it multiple times
There are.
because they participate. But I'm curious about the overall student population in high school, how many students are subject to that pay to participate fee?
I have the data, I don't file like that. I can do
We
it
don't have to have it
on
tonight,
if you
but-
like, but.
No, we don't have to have it
Okay.
tonight, but I would like to know that.
I mean, typically, when you look at our extracurricular participation, specifically in athletics, we do have a relatively high number of students that participate in at least one sport, and as you referenced, many are participating in several.
I remember that from the data, there's close to 1,000 individual payments. Now, that's, some of those maybe 2 or 3 from the same student over multiple sports. I think they're fairly close to 1,000 who are paying for athletic related. And that will be the high school and the middle school.
Yeah, if you get an offer tonight, would you let us know?
Yep.
Just curious about that.
I'm also curious if you could generate sort of some annual numbers, right? It's a little skewed if you look at when these things fade out and so forth. I'm kind of curious the annual impact, but like one thing that's clear is it's a big number, right? I mean, this is a big chunk of money in terms of whether we, have these fees or not. I'm always have purported to be, a fan of fees associated with usage to some extent, right? And increasing an activity fee, right, that goes to all students is a little different than participation fee, where effectively you're charging for the use. I mean, if our expenses related to these extracurricular events, right, are less for a student that doesn't participate in 3 sports or whatever, I'm not sure what the right way is to address that. I think student fees in general are an effective way to generate some revenue, right? Because it attaches the revenue to the expense, right? And we sort of tried that with our first levy attempt, right? By targeting, a tax in that case to the more specifically the parent base of the students, and we ended up with an all-income tax that's more broader in the community. So this was a piece of that whole financial puzzle, and it's a big piece of it as we look at it. I'm not sure I have a preference or an inclination. It seems to me that phasing out the participation fee makes sense only from an alignment to the income tax, right? Because our income tax is phased in over a period of time, right? It would seem like phasing out the fees, if we choose to do that, would make sense in parallel. That's just kind of one thing that kind of occurs to me. But, whether we attach, continue to have these fees or have them directed across the board or add some other sports and things like that, I'm not sure.
We're going to do this in board discussion.
Correct.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Do you have any other question? You got there.
Okay.
I have
Is that-
one other
okay.
question.
What question?
So Mike, on the last assumption, reduce the pay to participate fee by half and add drawing and marching band, is that assumption based upon the same participation level in drawing and marching bands
Yes.
we now have?
That's based on current assumptions of level of participation.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Mike, on the assumptions,
Yeah,
I've heard, and my understanding is, we don't initially see a change in participation maybe till about 3 years after, 2 to 3 years after a pay to participate is implemented. Do we use that in the calculations, or are we just trying to use what we saw this year?
I'm just using what we saw this year. I think as we were talking about this when we implemented this back in last summer, we were looking at different levels of fees, and as the fees got higher, the strain on participation, and I think the general feeling was at $200 for varsity sports, that was probably not at a level that would cause widespread non-participation or drop in participation. I think we've seen that so far in the numbers that have come pretty close to being what was expected.
I mean, I think what it might affect it is the marginal athlete in a certain sport that enjoys being a member of the team or enjoys the sport, but, you know, down the road, that might say, yeah, you know, $200 to not really participate might be a determining factor in their participation, so.
And I think the board's interest was collect some information. You're going to discuss it in board discussion, but I think it is also important to recognize that, you know, we still don't understand what the governor's going to do with the budget. So we are still waiting for that information. Obviously, that process occurs probably later in your decision-making cycle related to budget. But I think one of the things that we're going to be discussing, you know, moving forward over the next couple of months is our operating budget. We talked about capital today, but we're going to be talking about the operating budget, where we're going to allocate resources or not, based on the information of the landscape that we're going to be presented with.
Are there any other questions? We can do that now. If not, let's move to public comment. All right, so you've all waited patiently. This is the point in our agenda where we open the podium for public comment. We welcome public comment. If anyone has anything at all that they'd like to address to the board, please step forward, state your name and address, and speak freely. We welcome.
Good evening. Jay Snyder, 2061 Jones Road, Granville. And I'd like to address pay-to-play as it relates to the wider budget. Some of you know me well enough to know that I didn't come from one of the top districts in the state. I came from a district where when you drive into town, there's a sign that reminds you that we were the Division IV football champions in 1977, and you can't take that away from me. But, you know, from the perspective that I stand here now with, I don't doubt that pay to participate is a very important issue to many families in this community, many people here in this room. My children have been affected by a different policy that's very similar with the all-day kindergarten, which has cost our family at this point a little over $7,000. But as I look at that, I'm still pleased to have had the opportunity to send my children to all-day kindergarten. And after the failure of May's levy last year, we didn't cut any athletics, we simply readdressed how they're paid for. Meanwhile, we did cut things that have affected my family. My daughter was a beneficiary of the gifted programming at the elementary school, and meaningfully so. I find, especially as my son is now advancing to the stage where he would otherwise have it. And so I look at this from the perspective of there are things that are now utterly absent, and things that now we simply ask for some offsetting contribution in relation to. I certainly wouldn't advocate that we don't do away with pay to participate if we can. I mean, if we can, wonderful. But I would also suggest that the first duty of an institution of education is just that, education. And I would hope that as you consider this in relation to the larger budgetary issues that are before you, you'll look at that, consider it heavily, and the sorts of things that in my family, as it stands now, with some of the children in this district, if they are set behind academically, that could be a lifetime of setback in some ways, particularly in the early stages of their education. So this is not at all to suggest that pay to play should not be done away with, but simply that we address the priorities as best we can.
Thanks, Jason.
Hi, I'm Beth Havel. I live at 122 Spruce Drive, and it's nice to see all of you.
I'd like to follow up on Jay's comments for just a moment to say that I also have children who have benefited from the A-Space program. I have a child this year who should be receiving the services and isn't, and that saddens me greatly because, like Jay, I believe very firmly that we need to be focused on education where resources are limited. I devote a lot of time to doing what I can to support the district, and the educational issues are of utmost importance to my family. Today, I specifically want to speak about the importance of reinstating professional school librarians at all 4 of our buildings. From my observations as a library volunteer this year and conversations I've had, it's clear to me that the lack of professional school librarians at the intermediate and middle school buildings has taken a direct toll on our students and our teachers. Here are a few pieces I'd like you to consider. 1, librarians are media literacy experts who supplement and extend the content being delivered in the classroom. 2, librarians are content connectors who incorporate literacy and enrich the curriculum across the curriculum. Across all the subject areas, and bring literacy and technology to all of our classrooms. Librarians ignite passionate lovers of literature. Although our wonderful ELA teachers have a focus on young adult literature, not all of them have the time to review the hundreds of books that are published every single year. Science, math, and history teachers often need guidance in finding the latest nonfiction and fiction texts that they can bring into their classroom to illuminate their curriculum. An aide, which I understand is being considered, will not have the expertise to select fiction and nonfiction books for a wide range of readers. Classroom teachers don't have the time to pore over reputable sources such as the school library journal and Kirkus Review to find the best selections for our students. Currently, overall circulation and the number of new books being ordered at the intermediate and middle school are down significantly. Students frequently ask for new titles, which we just don't have. Aides do not have the expertise to guide students in book selection, neither do volunteers. Classroom teachers do not always have the same level of research expertise as librarians, who are trained in all aspects of research, including instructing students on music databases such as Info Ohio. Also, internet safety and proper online behavior, items that are required by the state, need to be directly instructed to protect all of our children. We also all know that student stress levels are dangerously high. Many students find the library a place of rejuvenation, solitude, and comfort in a hectic school day. I'd hate to think of the impact of another entire school year in which the library is not available much of the day. I know that many difficult decisions had to be made after the levy failure last spring, and I know that all of you struggle with how to balance the many needs in our district with our financial realities. I ask, as you look at our operating budget over the coming months, that the many educational needs, you consider the value of all of them, including professional librarians in all their buildings. I hope that as a community we can agree that librarians are critical to building passionate, well-rounded, 21st century leaders. Thank you.
Good evening, Matt Miller, 3949 Loudon here in Granville. I am not nearly as prepared as that. So, very eloquent, that was wonderful. So for the last couple of months, there's been a group of community members here that have been getting together to talk about an opportunity that I think we have following the passing of the school levy to form a public-private partnership. We talked earlier tonight about naming rights. Jeff talked about that a little bit. We also talked about some of the needs that we're going to have in our stadium in the coming periods, both the track, the stands that we have, as well as some of the needs around restrooms and things like that. And as we move down that path of doing some of those necessary changes, I think one of the things that we should think about as a school board, I would encourage you to think about, is making some approval through a resolution to commit to those items And as in concert with that, a group of community citizens will, I believe, move forward with an effort to not only move forward with a turf field, but also move forward with coming forward with the money that would be necessary for concession stands and new locker rooms for our athletic facilities. You know, I would tell you, as I've been a part of this community for 10 years, I've seen what's happened in some of the school districts that we compete against and some of the other school districts here in Licking County. And I think that Granville probably is falling behind. I think people come to our, I'll say, athletic facility and think, I'm surprised that this is what Granville has. I think that when they come to our school system in many other capacities, from an arts perspective and things like that, I think that we have very competitive facilities. And I would like to see us have competitive facilities across the board. The only way to do that, given how we pass the levy, is to do it through a public-private partnership. And so what I would like to suggest is there are a few folks that have come together and would be willing to, I believe, have a concerted effort to raise the money that would be necessary to do some of the things that we will not be doing with levy money, with the public money. And so, you know, I guess I would like to suggest that if the school board is going to move forward with some of their items, private partnership can work and will work well for our school system.
Thank you.
Evening, Dan Katona, up the road at 451 North Granger. Not dressed as well as Matt, or as funny as Jay, or as prepared as Brad. But I live the closest. So I would like to lend my voice to, I think, all of these conversations just a bit, and talk a bit about the library staffing situation as well as the e-space situation in light of the idea of a public-private partnership as we look ahead to what the situation can be in the future with regard to facilities. I prepared a very snarky and inappropriate address to you, which I will not deliver, but I'll say that I think it would be an interesting thought experiment to consider that perhaps the board has a very ingenious long-term strategy to mitigate the costs of all of these extracurriculars and AP classes and expensive extras for the older kids by siphoning off the growth of accelerated folks and learning at the younger grade level. What better way to choke that pipeline and keep those costs down than to refuse to fund elementary gift education in the way that you know that you should. We've had lots of time to talk as we've worked on various levy committees, and I consider you all my friends, and I'm happy to see you, and you're happy not to have seen me for a few months, I suspect, because we got through that process. But now's the time, I think, if it hasn't already passed, when you have to kind of grapple with those things that we talked about in that campaign and figure out how to do it. There are always going to be these trade-offs, and I know I was talking with Jeff about the state budget process, and it's a complicated dance, and it's no fun, but it does happen every 2 years. We go through that process with my state agency, and I know that you prioritize and you put your best foot forward as best you can. So boards before you have done that and figured out how to prioritize and make those investments, and those investments have led to good things that we're now able to talk about, and we do talk about and should. So I would encourage you to think along those lines and put yourselves in the shoes of your folks who will follow you in 10 and 12 years and more from now. Search for a way to balance those books in a way that allows those investments to happen. I'll say that as you look through, and you should if you haven't, the quality profile, again, I refresh my memory of what a great document that is that goes through the list of, I think, a kind of 80 separate little ace-shaped bullets that talk about the great accomplishments and accolades and things and achievements of the district. If you do a word search for the word gifted, you won't find it in that document. So the story that we tell ourselves right now as a district that values the really high achieving and the most gifted students is not a story that comes across in that document. I think that's probably just because there's not a good way for us to tell it in the way that we would like to, but I think that's a part of how we identify ourselves as a district. So that, to me, maybe is a gap and worth talking about. What else could be needed? I, like Jay and Beth, have some young kids that took part in that program and enjoyed it. I looked at lots of public comments on Facebook and elsewhere from folks that felt the same, and that were really sad that it went away. So I think there's value there. I think there's importance there. I think it's an important investment that you should consider. I also have a mom who volunteers in your libraries. So as you think about what, as well as some grandparents and parents who were career librarians, if you see the license plate books driving around, that's my dad. So we got lots of both of those things in the family, and I'll certainly agree and resonate with the idea that these are not the dusty libraries of the past. You've been there, so you know that they're media centers and they're different from what they were when we grew up. They're teaching kids how to identify fact from fiction and engage with all these sources of information that we encounter. So right now you're getting a lot of free labor from folks like Beth and my mom and others. It'd be great to get some pros in there and some folks who really are paid to do what they're supposed to do and help kids along and make those forward steps the way that you'd like them to do it. So good luck, and please do your best to see if there's a way to get all those pieces, parts aligned. We look forward to seeing how you do.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Carla Shopton McCarthy, and I'm at 555 Burke Street, and following all of you is a big mistake, because all I can do is win for longest name and shortest address. So I want to talk about another side of what we're not talking about, and that's the mental health aspect. The Advanced Learner Program. I have very exceptional children. Many of you that know them know they're a little quirky, they're a little different. And they have struggled socially here in Granville. And I don't think they're unique in that regard. Having the Advanced Learner Program in the elementary school gave them a safe place to grow. I can't say that enough, a safe place to grow. They didn't have that necessarily on recess, at lunch, in the classroom. I really didn't plan to talk tonight, but my 6th now grader is struggling daily socially, and it hurts. It hurts. And to know that there are other children behind her that may not have that safe place to be. So my question for you is, if they're not going to have that atmosphere that the ACE-based Advanced Learner Program provided for some of these kids that don't fit in and academically need a little extra support, and also provide an opportunity for other children in the classroom to shine when they're not in there. So there is that side of it as well. What is the plan? Is it a clustering model? Is it looking at other ways to support them in a mental health component? So I'm talking about a social emotional, not just an academic, but giving them a place to be. That leads me to the library. So I have an 8th grader, a 6th grader. This is my first year not in a library, sometimes multiple days. I worked in the elementary and the intermediate at the same time. And I say worked because I was there half a day usually. I saw what happened in those communities, in those libraries. I saw the opportunities for a lot of kids that don't fit in. And I mean, across the board, every make and model of child found a safe place in a library. From elementary, I don't know about high school. It's one library I haven't been in yet, that's next year. I saw in the middle school just wonderful, beautiful things that happened in that library. You walk in there now and start. What does that mean? And that just breaks a lot of our hearts when we know that our kids found a safe place to be. And they were all kinds of kids, your drama kids, your smart kids, your struggling kids, your athletic kids. It's all kinds of kids coming together and doing something in a space that didn't require them to be perfect or to perform. We need that. So I challenge you to find that. I challenge you to find a place where these kids can just be and be safe. I think we've lost that. And that I'm really, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it. It's a bad day at my house. So I just really want to make sure that we understand the struggles these kids have that may not be academic, that may not be athletic, and may not be musical or drama or anything like that. It's just getting through that day, finding a safe place to be, and having a very interested adult who passionately cares about their well-being and isn't giving them a break. And that's the other side of the library that I think is missing. And I think we need to all be aware of how important that is. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else care to come forward and share some thoughts? Thank you very much for that. With that, we'll close the public comment. And move to board discussion. And I'm going to, board's permission, deviate slightly. We said we indicated we wanted to discuss pay to participate tonight. We're clearly not in a position yet to make a decision on pay to participate, but I think it's a good opportunity to talk about some ideas, some thoughts, maybe ask, as I did earlier, for superintendent and treasurer to come back to us with some additional information which will inform our decision. We'll need to make a decision at some point. But in light of the public comments tonight, I would also expand that discussion. I think it's appropriate to expand that discussion to, again, not to make decisions tonight, but to ask for information, indicate what you'd like to see in terms of data, budget information, and the like, with respect to the cuts that we all made, regretfully made, and not happily made last May, and what we might do about that now. So with the board's indulgence, I'd like to open it up to a broader discussion. Let someone go first. If not, I'll start. So, as I indicated, and I said this last May, elections have consequences, and the consequences were immediate for our district, and unfortunately for the kids in our district. No one on this board, I dare say, put their name up for consideration for the Board of Education because they want to cut services, because they want to cut classroom services, library services, or otherwise. We've always been focused, as the superintendent has so aptly put it, on trying to do what's best for kids. And straight as we might as a board, he always keeps our focus on doing what's best for kids. And so we'll continue to try and do that. And do that in the greater context of the budget issues we have. Now, we were very gratified that we, through the work of a lot of folks in this community, passed the levy the second time around. And that gives us the ability to do certain things, including, as we discussed earlier tonight, make some long overdue repairs to facilities. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to look for ways to improve the services that we have. We also have to do that in light of what you think may come in the state budget. We know from hard experience that we're not going to get more money from the state of Ohio, and so we don't get less. So that's part of the context too. But I do think that the concerns that were raised here tonight, each of them, and Matt, I'm not including you because we'll get to that discussion as well, that's an important item. Each of them, the issue on pay to participate, and I don't think it's a zero-sum game. Eliminating or rolling back pay to participate precludes us or allows us to add back a service or increase another service, but certainly we've got to balance. We've got to find a balance. Pay to participate also affects a particular group of students, not all students, but a particular group of students. I would say that our elimination of libraries, as some of the speakers tonight have said more eloquently than I ever could, affects all students in some way, and that's something that resonates with me. Our elimination of ACE space in the elementary school also affects a certain segment of students. And I have always tried to, in my own mind, address that by looking at the fact that 55% of our students in this district test or qualify as gifted. And so we try and provide services that we may have provided in ACE space, we try and provide that in other ways. And maybe it's not an adequate replacement, it's certainly not a one-for-one replacement, but it's something we've tried to do. And I think we should look at that. I'd like to know more in our next discussion dive into some specifics about how we're serving students in the broader classroom, clustering as we do in some areas, including some other types of intervention, versus what we're achieving in the A space, so that we can look at that. And again, I don't pretend that it's a one-for-one trade-off. It's not, but it's something I'd like to know more about, so we can sort of evaluate that. I know we've talked about libraries. I know that's on your mind. I know that's something you're trying to address and address it in a way that provides services for students. So I think that's got to be a meaningful part of our discussion at our next meeting, and understand how we're looking at doing kind of what the costs there are. And then pay to participate. You know, as Fred indicated, one of the things we were concerned about when we implemented pay to participate is we didn't want to drive down participation, because I think we all think that participation in extracurriculars, whether it's athletics or anything else, is critically important to the development, to the growth of the kids in the school. I know from my own experience, my kids have all participated in high school athletics. Sometimes they were a strong performer on a team, and sometimes they weren't. But they all got tremendous value out of being on a team and participating. And I know, I've seen in my own kids, I've seen it in so many other kids. I was always struck, I used the girls' tennis team as an example. There were several years where there were some senior girls who came out for tennis for the very first time. And it took guts to come out for tennis the very first time in their senior year. And that team was close and cohesive and supported those girls, and did it. They didn't play much, but they were there and they were part of the team. And what I worried about when we put in pay to participate is those girls. And they would show up again. To pay that fee and be out there and not get on the court very much, having never done it. You know, I never want to close a door for a student. And so that's a big issue for me. As Thomas indicated, I think there is that trade-off where, you know, it's a fee for a particular service, a fee for participation, but I think it's also so much more than that. It's to me, what we've always said is there are critical aspects to education, and classroom education, curriculum, the strength of our teaching staff, our instructional staff, and support staff are the most important thing here, but also participation in extracurriculars. And so I remain concerned that while we haven't seen any appreciable drop-off in participation this year, in pay to participate, that there are studies and trends that indicate that it happens over a period of time. And I again come back to those girls that came out in their senior year. And I shudder to think, you know, someone doesn't. I think that's a real loss if that happens. So I want to look at pay to participate. I want to find ways to see if there's a way to lessen that burden. I want to find ways to see if there's a way to more broadly distribute that burden. I don't necessarily think that eliminating the fee and increasing the activity fee by $25, even though it more evenly distributes revenue, doesn't replace that revenue. And this isn't going to be solely about replacement of revenue, but that's obviously a big part of what we do. I also wonder if we took band out of, and full disclosure, I have a freshman student in the band. I wonder if we took that out of a classroom grade, whether we see a drop-off in participation there. I suspect maybe so, but I don't know. So, you know, what I'm doing is throwing mud into this discussion because I don't have a clear view of how to do this. But I think what you all hopefully should know is we all hear you. And barring the states coming down with some sort of windfall for us, which isn't going to happen, you know, we'll work through this and try and find the best way possible to provide the best possible educational experience for all of the kids in Granville. But I'd like specifically to dive in, as I said, to how we're servicing gifted, how we're trying to, adjustments we've made since we eliminated A space. I'd like to dive in specifically to thoughts on library and how we address that issue, because it's, we have been getting by, to the extent we're getting by, on the backs of well-intentioned volunteers. And that's fabulous that people do that. But, you know, we're a professional education organization, and we need to find ways to provide the services that are necessary. And then I'd like to see some of the data that we talked about, I asked earlier on, and just how many kids. We don't have to have it tonight if you want to, but that's fine. But that's part of the discussion also.
This is for last, we don't have full data for this school year. But for last school year, there were 951 different payers. Both payers or
One time.
let me rephrase it. We didn't have payers. There were 951 participants that were 678 different students. So 678 kids, and that would be across middle and high school. Participated in 951 sports, which is almost 1.5 per student.
So that was the year prior to beta
That
participation.
was your, yeah, we don't have full data.
We don't have spring data yet, but
We may probably don't even have winter data. It's probably, even the winter data is probably not all in yet.
okay. All right. And is it realistic?
Forecasted budgeted based on a reduction in that, but what's your general sense about what you've seen?
Basically, it's been right about what we expected it to be. So, and we didn't have a whole, that's $200, we did not build a lot of reduction days. And the other thing that we had not fully taken into effect was, no. Never mind.
Like, what's if we don't have all the data yet, I know spring sports are, you know, underway now, but it'll be a little while before we have the data. Is it reasonable to expect we can have all of that in place by our meeting in April, or is that going to take?
I think we'll have the money in place. We will not have the counts will not be in place probably until June or July, when it all gets loaded up into EMIS and the date, for the actual participation. But we will have, I would assume even by the April meeting, we'll know pretty much the dollars. I think everything would have been in for spring work by that point.
Can we do an internal unofficial count, or somehow figure out not getting the information through EMIS, but other way to back out based on the
We
fees
can
or something
probably
like that?
do an aggregate count. I'm not sure we can have an internal way to tell if one student's playing
No, I just got, this number was useful and interesting to me, that we have, 951 sport events, right, on 600 kids. I think that's off by 200, I'd be curious to know, right, but if it's within 10, that's also interesting. And I don't know what kind of granularity we can get by our own, audit.
I may be able to pull some data out of the, well, maybe we'll pull data actually out of the final forms. And we will pull data out of final forms that'll show the payments with the students. We may be able to pull that together for the April meeting.
Very helpful.
And
Are you done?
Go ahead.
That's all right. Yeah, no, I feel like we've kind of been put in this situation, by the May levy loss and the unfortunate changes that had to happen at that time. And I wish we could be more strategic about this and try to sort of like a long-term strategic financial plan, right? I mean, we need to be thinking and looking 4 years out when we have to pass this levy again. What's the world look like if we have a $10 million balance? What's the world look like if we have spent that $10 million balance? Those are both different tax that this and future boards can take over the next few years that have real implications financially and real implications from like a service perspective. And there's a couple of things here that can't wait for some more broad strategic plan. But I really think that, maybe that's what we should be initiating, is some kind of, longer term strategic plan from a finance perspective, and, goal setting, from a academic perspective, what, our hopes are and where those marry up effectively. And relative to kind of the shorter term decisions, I think getting some more decision on may participate would be helpful for an upcoming meeting. And I think looking more granularly at these issues, and maybe they're connected between, the gifted services and the spaces and the opportunities that we have for those kids in the libraries. And I'd like to see that be a very sort of community-involved process somehow. And And I'm not sure if the Whole Child Committee or if some of our support organizations can, be a part of that, or even come together for some brainstorming, or find some other way to do surveying, or even just like inviting those of you who came here tonight to continue to be involved and stay in tune, right, with ideas and feedback on potential plans. Because I know, Jeff, you've been thinking a lot about it, and this has been within our organization for the last year. It's really unfortunate for the kids. So I'd encourage you to reach out to the community members that were here and others that are passionate about this, to see if there are other ideas or bounce some models off of them, right, in terms of what might be the most effective. So. That's it.
You're good?
Yeah.
Well, I also wanted to echo what Russ said at the beginning. So we wanted to frame this discussion tonight from the standpoint of our permanent improvement budget, okay? Because that has a process that requires bidding, and it's very timely. The conversation around base-based library and some of the other things discussed in public comment, I think are also, timely from the standpoint of in April, we will be talking more about our operating budget for the following year. And, what does one decision make, or if we make one decision, what does that look like 5 years out? And modeling, much like you've done models in the past related to your decisions. I think that's a critical conversation, but I also think that there's an opportunity. We've been going through this process of looking at our portrait of a graduate and thinking more holistically about what an education is. And I think there's also opportunity for, a broader conversation about what do these services look like previously, currently, and in the future, that will help get us to the place that we want to be from a holistic education. Because the reality is, depending on which child, we're trying to find or hope they're finding their niche in whatever we provide, whether it's arts, athletics, academics. We want to have a safe space for all kids to find their niche and develop their passion and purpose. And so it is a challenge, and we do have limited resources. So there are going to be good, difficult conversations, but I think they're necessary, and the expectation, as you've heard, is for us to provide a top-notch education. And so I look forward to those conversations. A lot of the people in this room that just articulated their perspectives were the people helping us support that levy, that are giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. If the levy didn't pass, we wouldn't have these conversations. So we'd be having more difficult conversations. So I think it's the right time, and both are important.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate you coming ahead of time, ahead of when we were initially, planning the discussion, because then it allows us to actually have more information in front of us when we have this, next month. It gives us the questions that we need to ask of you, and the guidelines for the models that we need to run. So I appreciate the community being here and letting us know what some of their priorities are, what we're missing now that we've cut some of those services, and encourage us to take sort of a holistic approach. How are we meeting the needs of gifted students K to 6? I mean, in 7-12 it's different because we have different opportunities in classes like that, and a space may be the right way to go, or we may be able to do this, like you said, in innovative ways that combines, library with gifted, with whatever. So I think it's a perfect opportunity to look, just take a look at how are we providing these services or not providing these services, and like you said, in the past, currently, and how we want to do it in the future. Pay to participate. I think there's pros and cons to all of these models. I have a kid who participates in sports, and he participated in gifted, so he's been able to take advantage of all of these things, and he's the better for it. I actually don't mind paying, but perhaps paying less would be also a good thing. Would be participation rates might balance out if it were less. So, you know, I think I lean towards either reducing and then phasing out, particularly like Thomas mentioned, you know, the tax, you know, doesn't come in all at once. And so I think it would behoove us to look at, you know, how do we phase it out or reduce it, and or possibly include drama and marching band. You know, those are expensive endeavors, and so not putting all of the burden on athletics necessarily. So, but I also think, you know, we have to look at it in the bigger picture of what are our educational goals. You know, K-12 or K-6 in addition. So I don't know that I don't want to pit one thing against another, but I think we need to look at it as, you know, like a unit. But I do appreciate parents being here and letting us know so that we can get the information that we need to have a richer discussion about it moving forward.
I'll just put it out there, I hate pay to participate. I'm probably the only board member who's had a child that previously, the 1 year we did pay to participate. If it's just, because I do agree we have to look at the big picture, but if we have to do anything with pay to participate, I definitely think we need to expand it to a broader base. And I've heard that from a lot of athletic families, that it needs, you know, it feels like it's just a user fee in athletics. But I do appreciate the folks talking about ACE space and the librarians, and I think, you know, I like what you said, Jeff, about the time is right to look at all these things, and we have to balance them. And if we are going to do something with a public-private partnership, I think we need to keep that in mind too, about added fees. We're asking the community again to participate financially. And at least for this board member, you know, I'm sensitive to that. Since I do appreciate them supporting the levy, but I'm also aware of, you know, how it might be, how it will affect the community. So I am happy to delve into it more and want to look at it, because I agree with the other board members. It's not one or the other. It's what we have to do for the entire school system.
My father was a member of the GHS class of 1937. And when it came to his 4 kids, he told us that he felt as though it didn't matter particularly what the name of the school that we went to was, that anyone could get a really good education anywhere there was a library. But a library is not a room. And Mrs. Clausen and Mrs. Montgomery have done an amazing job of trying to run 2 libraries, but you can't do that. And you can't expect them to. And however good the volunteers are, it's not the same as having the right person welcoming them. I think that too, our May meeting, and Nick coming and telling us that he found it ironic that we were having to let go of the person who was teaching them how to discern between good and bad information on the internet, and that was what hit my heart.
appreciate everyone who came and opened up. It's not easy to do.
We were all sick in May.
Thank you for the comments. Share just a couple of other data points, just because we're talking about a lot of different things tonight. We're talking about services, we're talking about fees for participation, we're talking a little bit about potential public-private partnership. We've already talked this evening, we had a presentation this evening on our investing in the physical assets of the district. What's important to note is there are really two buckets of community money that we access. 80% of our budget, roughly, Mike can tell you within a decimal point, I can't, 80% roughly in our budget is spent on people. Teaching staff, support staff, administrators, bus drivers, folks who feed our kids, folks who clean up after our kids. That's the operating budget. What I call the capital budget, that we call generally the permanent improvement budget, is the physical assets, buildings, desks, chairs, technology, all of those things. We can take money from, we can't take money from the operating budget, excuse me, we can take money from the operating budget and put it into the capital budget to do more repairs. We cannot take money from the capital budget by law, put it into the operating budget. So we couldn't say we're going to spend less money on the buildings and put more money into teaching. We can't do that. So we balance those, and as the superintendent indicated, those are sort of separately two budget tracks that we look at the same time. So I'd ask you to keep that in mind as we continue this discussion, and I hope you will all continue to participate with us in that discussion. But when I said earlier, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that we would say, for example, we won't buy a new bus this year, or we're not going to invest in the bleachers at the football stadium, and therefore we can add back Librarians and space. The two don't equate in the budget process. That doesn't mean we don't make tough choices about where we want to put our money and where we want to commit our resources, but that's part of that process. The other thing I'll say is, it's the last thing I'll say, pay to participate helps offset some of the costs. For athletics, it doesn't cover it. It doesn't cover anywhere close to it. So if we reduce it, it just covers less. If we leave it there, it still covers a portion, but it doesn't cover everything. But that's a factor. Was there any other?
That's part of our operating budget.
Yes.
Our pay to participate is part of our operating
Yes,
budget.
exactly. Goes to pay people who work with the kids, with the students.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, please.
Oh, I don't know.
The president said yes. So
Could be a two.
I also want people to appreciate that this year has been difficult from the administrative side of the equation as well. You know, Travis and Gail lost their assistant principal. So I want you to put this into context. Travis is managing 710 students under the age of 10 by himself, with a few other support people that do other jobs. So think about that when you go home and you're trying to manage your two. You know, Gail is in the same boat. And so, you know, everything that we lost, we valued. That's why it was such a difficult job for all of us on the board who make these decisions to make them. But I think they have done a phenomenal job in very challenging circumstances. And that's across the board. You know, the staff has adjusted, you know, the teaching staff, the support staff, the administrative staff. I'm proud of how we've recovered, but there's more conversations to be had. So, but I needed to say that because on behalf of Travis and Gail,
they may have aged 40 years.
Galen, you haven't changed a bit.
Yes.
I got the hair colored last week.
So,
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it. You're welcome to stay. It gets more exciting. I will entertain the motion to end the executive session. So this is a motion to enter into executive session to consider the employment of a public employee or official. We will take that meeting upstairs. You're all welcome to stay. We'll come back downstairs after we finish that meeting and have more business to cover.
Dr. Corman?
Yes.
Ms. Wolf? Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Ms. Rowland?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Aye.
And anybody that just introduced today should at least introduce himself to Brittany Fiello in the front row, who may indeed be session.
Next on our agenda, on the action agenda, 10.01, the administrator contract.
Second.
Almost died for lack of a second.
That's no.
Yeah, no, so there would have been a bunch of seconds here. So we're about to have a discussion and then vote on a contract of employment for the person that the board has selected as our new treasurer to succeed Mr. Sobel. And that person is Brittany Trillo. We welcome her tonight. So I'll open up the discussion and folks can make comments.
Thanks. I'm excited about which I hope is just formality, the approval of Brittany as our next treasurer. Especially as a new member, it was a really good, thorough process that I'm proud to say, with help from the administration, we put together. We didn't pay an outside firm to do this, but I thought it was an outstanding job. We had outstanding candidates that applied, and personally, I'm very excited and look forward to Brittany serving as Granville's next treasurer.
I agree, and just, some of the reasons that, I think you rose to the top, at least in my mind, was I appreciated the amount of details that you were able to give in your responses during the interview process. And so I don't think there was any question left unanswered at all, and I appreciated that. I appreciate the experiences you've had in the different districts, and that you've been a treasurer, but also your current role gave you lots of interesting experiences as well. So, and your ability to communicate, which I think is going to be vitally important, going forward. So, all those things I appreciate, your abilities in those areas, and that's why, chose to jump in.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see you here and to have you join our district. There's a couple of things as well. Communication for sure, but also kind of you're kind of demonstrated different channels that you have used in communication. I think it's going to be really important for us going forward. There's a lot of different ways that people receive information, and it's usually not sitting in a board meeting. Occasionally it is, right? But I think we need to find some new ways to engage our community around the finances and these tough decisions that we have strategically, financially, academically, and so forth. And I think you've demonstrated some really great things in the past jobs that you've had that have done that. And the other thing is, we set up, a bar around kind of the technical competence and so forth to ensure that you were great at accounting, you knew the school systems and things like that. But beyond that, it was clear you had a real passion in sort of like a nerdy, geeky way for this accounting stuff. That was really great. That was really awesome, right? Because there's one thing like being competent and able to do something, right? There's another thing in being so interested in it, right? That you go to the next level. So I really appreciated that personally, and I know that you're going to bring a great passion to the job that's really going to benefit our students. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that you accepted the offer. I think you're going to be a great fit for this community.
You have great experience. For those of you who don't know, Brittany graduated from the Ohio State University and then got her MBA from Cincinnati. She's been a treasurer in a small district. She's been in the Cincinnati Public School Systems, the director of financial reporting and transparency, which if you think about the critical elements to being a treasurer in a school district, financial reporting and transparency are right up. So tremendous experience, broad experience. The folks that worked with her in the past speak effusively about Brittany, not just about your competency, your willingness to learn, your willingness to dig in and solve hard problems, but your personal interactions with folks, with the community, with your colleagues, with people around you. I suspect some of that goes back to the fact that you said you wanted to be a teacher when you were a child, and so you clearly have great affinity for the profession, and let's face it, that's what this is all about. It's all about facilitating education, and so I think your qualifications are impeccable. In the times we had where we were able to spend with you and interview you, you struck me as a person who had a great curiosity about you. And you ask probing questions, asking for details, asking for information, you sort of lead to conclusions, and I think that's fantastic. I think we received, I think, 22 or 23 applications for the position. We interviewed 7, and your qualifications, your experience, your demeanor, your personality, your enthusiasm shone through. And it was, I know we're all enormously pleased to have found you, whether you found us, and you'll be joining us here in Granville as we've all talked about. Mike Sobel has, and we'll speak about Mike later. We're here till midnight. But Mike has set the bar exceedingly high. We're not looking for the next Mike Sobel, we're looking for the next treasurer of Granville. I'm thrilled that you're going to be the next treasurer of Granville, and you'll create your own path. And you'll do it in your style, which I think will be enormously beneficial to this community and to the kids that we all work to serve. I want to say a little bit about the process. We're indebted to Tanya in particular for all of her guidance, all of her leadership in the process. It's not uncommon for boards to hire outside professional consulting firms at a fee to go and survey the universe of potential candidates and bring them to us and really sort of serve it up on a platter for us. We elected not to do that. We thought we'd rather not spend the community's money that way. And we had great confidence in Tanya's ability to handle that process, to marshal that process for us, and she exceeded those expectations, and so we're grateful for that. Thank you, Tanya. You made this quite a good process for us. And so with that, I think we probably have to vote. Make this a formality before we change our mind. So please call the roll.
Ms. D.
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Good luck. It's a lovely card.
But there's nothing left in the hand.
So in terms of sort of administrative issues to deal with, Brittany's administrative contract, your contract will start June 1st. But we'd like you to start May 1st and overlap with Mike for a month while he's on his way out the door. He'll be on the golf course. If you play golf. He'll be playing tennis. It's too soon for golf.
Yeah, I think so.
Better not, we start in April.
All right. Brittany will be here in May to work on that transition. So the next thing we need to do is approve that interim 30-day, 31-day agreement. So,
Second.
Amy and Fred. I don't think there's any reason for any further discussion. Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeb. Aye. Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Dr. Cornman.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye. Thank you. And again, welcome. I'll sign the contract.
Sign it now.
Our meetings don't always.
No.
He's lying.
Yeah, I used to do this all the time.
10.03?
Well, when I was board president.
Yes.
Yeah. Brittany, the board hires 2 people. I know they're getting yours right. So I'm very happy that you're joining our team on the administrative side and working with, I think, one of the best boards in the state of Ohio, if not the country. So welcome aboard. I'm looking forward to a long relationship doing the good work of Granville Schools. All right, 10.03, final forums contract.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, this is the final forms software that we've been using to streamline some of our paper processes that are archaic. It's well worth the revenue that we spend. Saves us a lot of money.
We're just having a discussion earlier this evening about how the final forms process has made life simpler and easier for
Not to mention Lisa.
yeah. No, it's increased the efficiency. It's much more user friendly. Any comments or questions?
Dr. Cornman.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Ms. Deeb.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Next item is 10.04, approval of the joint statement related to the Business Community Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second?
This committee are required by state law.
Correct. Yeah, we align with the Licking County ESC to provide that structure for our advisory councils that are required by law.
Questions?
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Cornman.
Aye.
Ms. Deeb.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
10.05 is the approval of the aid job description. And I will comment once.
So moved.
Second. So, as was referenced several times, our current aid job description does not have the ability for us to include library aides if we so choose to make those hiring decisions. So, I think the conversation about what is the future of library is one that I think you heard from a variety of people. We need to have a broader discussion around. I think it is going to be a very similar conversation that we had related to the innovation process. When you think about all the aspects of what we're currently offering related to building students' capacity, makerspace, design thinking, project-based learning, portrait of a graduate, all those things can congeal in a space if we design it right. So I think it's an opportunity for us to have a broader conversation about the future of what we want those spaces and those opportunities to be for our students. This does not mean that you are hiring a specific person today. latitude to broaden the definition of a library. Okay, questions?
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Ms. Deeds. Dr. Cornman.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
The next item is 10.06, the public-private partnership resolution.
Second.
So, a lot of discussion has been had around the notion of a public-private partnership that is, as Mr. Miller referenced, an opportunity for us to partner with the business community and other community members to update our facilities. And when looking at our fiscal plan for capital investment in our assets, we've identified certain areas that need to be upgraded related to the safe and accessibility standard that is set by ADA and others. And if we have the ability to delineate and partner public funds and private funds to advance greater facility access to our community and our students, I think we should take advantage of them. So this resolution would be a gesture to advance that concept of a public-private partnership.
What's the best way for us to kind of communicate publicly about the status of things and how things are moving in terms of what the overall plans are, how this partnership might come to fruition, so it's kind of clear and we're...
I think once we have this in place, we can go and have some more strategic conversations about the next steps from a formal standpoint. Because I think there's organization and communication that needs to happen with those entities that are going to form the private side of the equation.
Okay.
In my fundraising efforts throughout the county, I think this is, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, potential contributors are looking to see what the entity has skin in the game, so to speak. And I think this is a gesture that helps open those doors by showing that the district is supportive of this private effort, this grassroots type of effort too. And I think it's just the nature of how fundraising is going in Licking County, at least, as well as with some organizations that we're requested for funds. It just seems to be, what you guys do to participate in it as well. And this will be extremely helpful in those efforts. The other thing, just for the record, I would like to state that this board, we're committing to something that, since I've become a member, the safety and accessibility. There's nothing more except what we've consistently talked about.
Yes.
I think, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate the group of committee members coming together to, partner with us in this endeavor, because we do have needs that we need to address. And I think this is, a partnership will help us address those needs. So I appreciate their efforts.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for us to work with people who have volunteered, have already given up their time and volunteered to give more of their time and ultimately of their money. What we've heard from the folks who are leading that private group is that they think they can raise a significant amount of money to improve our facilities, but they've been asked by potential donors, what's the school going to do? And what we said is, as we consistently said, as Fred pointed out, we'll take care of things that relate to safety and accessibility. So in the case of the athletic stadium, it's making sure the bleachers are up to code, that they're accessible, that they're appropriate ramps, that, and we've known, because we spend money every year trying to make sure that the bleachers are safe. Last year, I remember this last football season, 4 or 5 days before the first game, we had contractors out working to make sure we didn't have to close off an entire section of that issue of the bleachers. We need to bring the restrooms up to code. We need to have them. They're an embarrassment. We need to do better, and we can and we should. What it requires of us is to affirm that we'll do the things we said we're going to do to improve safety and accessibility, and also to work on timing. So, for example, as Tanya indicated in her report, the track, the running track at the stadium is at the end of its useful life. And we might have elected to replace that this year, resurface it for $250,000. But if this private group is successful in raising funds to put in a turf field, it's going to cause problems with the track, ruin the track when they put in the field. So the track should go in after the field. So we're going to patch it this year. It'll work. It'll get by, and we'll plan to replace it after. Hopefully, they've been successful in raising funds for the turf field. So it requires us to coordinate our timing on certain things, and by our resolution tonight, if it's approved, what we're effectively saying is, yes, we're going to go ahead and do the things we said we would do. We've said we would do them all the way along, and we're going to work together on timing to coordinate with this group that's raising money. And as Jen said, I think we're all enormously grateful to them for giving us their time and their willingness. And many of these folks are the same folks who've worked on levy campaigns, who volunteered in the community. So we get to them for doing that. And I hope that they're successful. And if they are, it's to the benefit of everyone. If they're not, and I don't think that'll be the case, then we'll continue to do what we said we were going to do and make the repairs as we would make them anyway.
To the stand.
Right. Right, to the stands and to the restoration and the track. Right. Questions or comments?
I think one of the exciting things about this project is that in so doing, it greatly expands who gets to use the stadium and the amount of time it will get used. So I think that's an exciting aspect.
Yes, it'll turn it into a 7-day-a-week facility that can be used by all sorts of groups. We talked about whether that's, women's field hockey or the band hosting band festivals or, other groups that will be able to use it.
And I think one thing that's sometimes overlooked, the physical education classes will be able to use it. Not only at the high school, if from the other schools, if they, with the scheduling, could come over and use it during the day as well.
Dr. Corman,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Muller,
Aye.
Ms. Deeds,
Aye.
Mr. James.
Aye. And again, with appreciation to the folks who are leading that private effort.
So the next item is the consent agenda. So if you could amend the current agenda to include the addendum.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Ms. Deeds,
Aye.
Dr. Corman,
Aye.
Mr. Muller,
Aye.
Mr. Janine.
Aye. Now we'll discuss that. Right. We need a motion now to discuss the 10.0.
Well, now we need a motion to approve as amended.
Got it.
Consent agenda, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
A through C9.
Yeah. Thanks. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'd like the opportunity to point out a few things of note. Obviously, we always appreciate the donations that have been provided. First item that I call your attention to is item C2. We are rescinding the reduction in force for Erica Mackley. Later in the consent, I'm going to thank Hallie Bathiani for her service. She is moving to the Tiffin area. Her husband got a new job, and so she's departing for next year, which invoked our recall of the reduction in force. So Erica, as you know, was our librarian at the Granville Middle School, and she is licensed in English Language Arts, which is what Hallie taught. Haley, thank you. So she will be recalled. She has already accepted the recall. So this is the formal approval. And we all know how much we appreciated her comments last year. Certified contracts, the hiring of Mandy Knowlton. She is going to be in second grade next year, and we appreciate her joining our team. And then we have the resignations. Haley Bathiani, Evan McCall as referenced by Glenn earlier, and Jennifer Atkins is the college and career coordinator at Granville Christian, even though she's technically our employee, but she's paid out of auxiliary funds. So obviously we appreciate all the service that they have provided to the school district over their years of service. Retirements, so we have 3. Renee Runyon is a mathematics teacher at GHS. Renee has dedicated a large portion of her life to the efforts here in Granville and providing quality mathematics instruction. We appreciate her service, and hopefully she can enjoy retirement. Next we have Gail Burris, effective December 31st.
I was asked by some of your senior staff not to approve that.
Yes. This is true. And I made that comment earlier because, we understand the level of responsibility our administration take in the leading of those buildings, and Gail has done a phenomenal job. But she's also at the end of her career and ready to take that next step, but will be departing December 31st. And so that allows us the opportunity to potentially have a transition and provide some support to, GIS or GES and GIS at the same time. So Gail has been an absolute pleasure to work with over my tenure here. Gail is resolute. She believes what she believes, and she convinces people to perform at high levels. And she is leaving GIS in a position that is absolutely positioned for success in the future. So that's the sign of a strong leader. And I know I can speak on behalf of the leadership team. We're going to miss her. So, but she still has some more time. So I'll tell more later. And then the third retirement is Kevin Jarrett, our athletic director. And when you talk about the volume of sports and our offerings that we offer in athletics, I think you would be hard pressed to find a person that has dedicated as much time to the position of athletic director than Kevin Jarrett. And I appreciate his service to this community, and I wish him the best in retirement. His tenure here has been 10 years, and during that time we've added a number of sports and not added any support to that athletic department to manage it. And he's accepted that humbly and done the best job that he possibly do in support of our students' athletic endeavors. So I appreciate Kevin's service to this community and to our students.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes?
On the addendum, shouldn't it be 11 and 1101?
Yes.
Those aren't rolled into the other.
They will be.
They will.
It's on the final
That's why
one.
they should be.
Yeah, they'll be rolled in on the final one.
So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We hope we'll have a chance to say goodbye before you go.
That means you have to come back.
At least one more. Yeah, you've just been phenomenal. And I've had several children who had the pleasure of going through that school under your leadership. And it's been a great experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miss you. I would second what you said about Kevin. It doesn't matter whether you show up at 7 in the morning or you're there at 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night at any of the athletic facilities. He's there. And, makes it all work. And he's just really tireless to make that work. And so I appreciate all that he's done and the service that he's done. And you couldn't have said it better. He's just a very humble guy. He works hard and puts others ahead of his own interests.
I'd just like to add, as the former booster president, he put into place some really good, a much better process to how things were done, streamlined things, and made it, I think, much easier on a volunteer group to make decisions and to assist with the athletic teams. And in the 10 years, I mean, we've probably had some of our most successful stretch over 10 years athletically, success-wise, when he was as the athletic director. So, I appreciate his service to us.
Take the roll.
Dr. Corn?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Dees? Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Point one is the financial statements for the month of February.
Motion?
So moved. Second.
I will keep this short. Through February, revenues are 4/100% below estimate.
That's the standard.
Expenditures are 45/1000% below estimate.
Gonna show up at your
He's just showing off.
It's
Intolerable.
Who wrote this software?
As we have on the first page, the summary of the 5-year forecast does include the income tax. It does not include any of the changes that we will be talking about over the next month as far as bringing back, or what we choose to do as far as pay participate, as far as the libraries and the other positions. One thing that has changed I've updated some of the data in here as we've gotten it, but also we have added, for enrollment purposes, an additional second grade teacher beyond the one you approved tonight was to replace Mrs. Danford. The one, we have added an additional position in second grade to meet enrollment needs to, I think, avoid having about 26 kids in class next year in second grade. And so that is included in here because it's an enrollment driven change. That is about it, unless you have questions.
Let's talk about that discrepancy.
I know, it got worse from last month.
Out the door already.
Any questions or criticisms?
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Ms. Deeds.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Denise. 12.2 is a resolution authorizing a transfer of excess funds in the bond fund to the PI fund.
Second.
You'll recall a couple of years ago, we were able to do this, and that helped us I think we used it towards the infrastructure project at the tennis courts. That became more expensive than we
anticipated because of excess water. We are proposing moving $375,000 this time into the permanent improvement fund. Most likely, this will help us fund the track portion and part of the stands, although we are not committed to doing that with the money. It will still leave us in a position that at the end of this year, for payment next year, the bond rates will be reduced by between 0.5 and 0.6 mils, as we promised the voters as part of the income tax back in November.
Questions?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Cornwell?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings? Okay, 12.03 is updated revised appropriation for the current fiscal year.
So moved. Second?
There are 5 changes to the appropriation from the one that was in place. The first is to let us accomplish what we just voted on, and the last one is the appropriation so I can move the money and have enough appropriation to do that. We are adding $50,000 of appropriation into the permanent improvement fund, again with the passage of the income tax and the transfer, so that if we may not need it, but if there's some projects we need to get started before the end of this year, it gives us a little more flexibility to do that. And then the third increase is the district-led activities fund, the 300 fund, which is primarily the sports-related activities, drama, music. I believe appropriated the same amount of money in there for several years now. We've never come close to the appropriation. I think because of a couple of trips in drama and music, we have bumped up against that appropriation. There's plenty of cash in the fund. This is just upping the appropriation by $75,000. It's primarily going to be because we kind of topped out with athletic, and there's some things that we need to do in there. There are 2 reductions. One is for Granville Christian from the auxiliary funds. We now know the actual amount of revenue that they have for the year, which is a lower amount than the appropriation was for, so we're lowering the appropriation down to their actual cash. And the third one is just a minor change in the food service fund, where the last appropriation was actually like $1,400 above the certificate of resources, so it's just bringing the appropriation in line with the certificate of resources. It won't have any practical impact on anything. It's just a legal move.
Questions? The third one you mentioned is for trips primarily, but are also
It's
reimbursed?
what caused us to hit the appropriation are trips that are reimbursed. The problem is, we have to appropriate for it even though the money comes back.
Right, so it's not necessarily.
Yeah, and so that they were just a lot higher than they've been in the past. We hit up against that, the appropriation limit. None of that is taxpayer. There's nothing in the 300 fund that's taxpayer dollars. That's all money that either is collected for trips or generated through athletic or drama or music activities.
Thanks for that clarification.
Other questions?
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Coleman?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings?
Aye.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Coleman? Mr. Jennings?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.